Chapter 741. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these girls were stunned for a moment. To be honest, they were already prepared to go back to Winthrop with Jiang Hai. At that time, they would help Jiang Hai solve some of his personal problems and also solve some of his male needs. As long as they can live freely, breathe fresh air, and don't have to walk on the edge of the cliff all day, they are already satisfied. Just like Aphrodite and the others, their requirements were very low. As long as they were full, warm, and no longer bullied, that was enough. In order to maintain this kind of life, they can give up everything. Aphrodite and the others only have their own bodies. And what they have, and their own skills, wanting to live like a normal person, they have never thought about it. But now Jiang Hai's words, to be honest, did directly hit their hearts. For them, Jiang Hai is not in a hurry to go back to rest, but he also wants to accompany them to play and buy things for them, which made them a little touched. Even Jialina, who was in Jiang Hai's arms, had a very complicated mood. She didn't know what to say. Of course, they definitely didn't fall in love with Jiang Hai, they don't even like him. Before this sentence, they might not even have a good impression of him. But after this sentence, their impression of Jiang Hai has changed a little. At least they have some inexplicable good impression of him. Think about it, what do you want? Or where do you want to go to play? Looking at the crowd in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. It doesn't matter where we go. Over the years, we've been to Europe, Asia, America, Oceania, and Africa. We've been to all of them. To be honest, we're not interested in the scenery anymore. Instead, we're very interested in your manor. If possible, we'd like to go to your manor as soon as possible. As for what to buy, can we bring jewelry? After listening to Jiang Hai's words, these women looked at each other, and finally, Wallace Shelley, who is closer to Jiang Hai, said to him. Listening to her shining eyes, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod with some amusement. Are you not allowed to wear jewelry? Looking at these women in front of him, Jiang Hai nodded and asked with some doubts. Of course, things like jewelry are indeed not allowed. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina said directly. Then she explained to Jiang Hai why they can't wear jewelry. First, jewelry is beautiful, but almost all jewelry is reflective. Earrings, rings, necklaces, these things, whether it's gold, silver, platinum, diamond, or even steel, all of them are reflective. And if they collide with each other, it's easy to make a sound, exposing one's position. Secondly, jewelry attracted the attention of others. For example, during an assassination at a cocktail party, when Azalina helped Jiang Hai deal with the family's father and son, she disguised herself as a waiter, which was very inconspicuous. This was the most important thing. Third, jewelry will more or less reduce one's combat effectiveness. For example, when wearing a ring, it will definitely affect one's ability to hold a gun, not to mention holding a sword or a dagger. Necklaces are easy to move up and down when running, which will also affect one's ability to move. Earrings, for them, every time they do a mission, they need to put a mini earbud in their ears. Wearing an earring is troublesome. Just these 3 points alone, as long as these women are in the middle of a mission, they have nothing to do with jewelry. The only thing that can wear jewelry is the web spider, because the biggest role of the web spider is to collect information, and the place to collect information is most of the time, get it? They needed something that men couldn't describe, so they needed to attract men's attention. Jewelry was indeed a small accessory that attracted men. However, these girls that Jiang Hai bought are all CS, so they have no chance to wear jewelry. Hearing Azalina's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile, and then waved his hand. These are all small problems. Okay, before we leave, let's go buy jewelry. Jiang Hai wanted these girls, first, to protect himself and his family, and second, to let them find out who wants to harm him. As long as these two problems are solved, in fact, it doesn't matter. They don't need to do missions, go out on missions, and so on. If they want to wear jewelry, naturally there is no problem. Yay, boss, I love you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Huali Shelley couldn't help but shout excitedly, and then directly threw herself on Jiang Hai's arm, and then kissed Jiang Hai's cheek. Looking at her appearance, the other girls also smiled. That day, Jiang Hai and the others didn't go out of the house again, but also didn't do anything. After all, no matter how strong Jiang Hai is, if he does too much, he can't stand it. These girls also need to rest, and the food was bought by Azalina downstairs. As for the problem of safety, with Jia Lina and the others, Azalina doesn't need to follow Jiang Hai 24/7. That night, Jiang Hai slept alone in the room, and didn't do anything else. Early the next morning, after Jiang Hai and the others recovered, they had breakfast in the morning and left the hotel. Of course, there was a special car sent by Black Orchid to pick them up. Jiang Hai first took them to the best department store in Kiev to buy clothes and so on. But now, although there are people in Kiev and other streets, but people are really in a hurry. After going to the mall, Jiang Hai found that the shopping mall here is, in fact, on the verge of closing down. The waiters and so on are also somewhat weak. It seems that this turbulent situation is really making the life of the people here very difficult. But Jiang Hai's heart softened. He won't do anything to this country. The gun will hit the bird that sticks out. He doesn't want to be the bird that sticks out. He spent some money here and bought a lot of beautiful clothes for each of the girls. At the same time, he also went to a jewelry store all over the world to pick out jewelry for the girls. In the end, each of the girls had a set of jewelry, a ring, a bracelet, a pair of earrings, and a necklace. To be honest, with these things and new clothes, the girls' beauty had increased by another level. Even though everyone was in a hurry, there were still quite a few men who would stop to take a look at them from time to time. Even for Azalina, Jiang Hai bought a lot. After everything was bought, Jiang Hai and the others returned to the hotel. This time, these girls served Jiang Hai well. Except for Jia Lina, who was still a little reluctant, the other girls used their body disintegration technique. After all, they had been training since childhood, so this was something that they had to train in. Because no one knows whether they will become wolves or spiders, tarantulas, web spiders, or poisonous spiders, these basic things need to be trained. He has to admit that these professionally trained girls, Jiang Hai really can't handle them. When he got up the next morning, Jiang Hai felt that he seems to be a little weak after resting for an afternoon. At noon, Jiang Hai and the others took the organization's car to the airport. They are going back to Winthrop. After a long flight, the plane landed at the airport in Boston. Before coming back, Jiang Hai had already called Moses Adams, Robbins Garcia, and Edward Anderson, so when they left the airport, there were already 3 cars parked outside. After the 3 cars picked them up, they went directly to Moses Adams' law office to apply for regular work visas. Generally speaking, work visas are signed once a year, but Jiang Hai doesn't want them to go back to Wulan. This kind of thing may be a little troublesome for others, but for Jiang Hai, it is nothing. If it was when he first came here, he naturally wouldn't dare to say this. But with the passage of almost 2 years, not to mention in Winthrop, in Boston, even in Massachusetts, Jiang Hai is quite a famous person. Paying hundreds of millions in taxes a year, coupled with the fact that he had just bought the sea, Jiang Hai had become a VIP guest of the entire Massachusetts state government. And his lawyer, Moses Adams, not only has made a lot of money in more than a year, but his status has also improved significantly. He went directly to the immigration department and directly applied for a 10-year work visa. After 10 years, there is no need to go back. As long as Jiang Hai's power is still there at that time, there will be no problem. After applying for the visas, Jiang Hai also talked to them about the salary. At first, they really didn't think that they would be paid. But when Jiang Hai brought the contract, to be honest, these girls were a little touched. It seems that Jiang Hai is just like he said. He doesn't treat them as tools or weapons, but really treats them as ordinary people, even family. So they have nothing to argue about and directly sign their names. Everyone is the same, with a weekly salary of $2,500. Although this weekly salary is quite high, Jiang Hai doesn't think that they are not worth it. This week, after everything is settled, Jiang Hai took them back to his home, which is his manor and his villa. But after returning home, seeing a group of girls swarming in, Xiaosi and Qi Jie's faces didn't look too good. But on the surface, they still gave Jiang Hai enough face. At the party, they were very enthusiastic and welcomed these people to join the big family. Then Jiang Hai specially allocated rooms for them. First, the two of them lived together, but Lalise Carter and Wallace Shelley lived in the same room. Bariak and Dunan lived in the same room, Valentina and Alfred lived in the same room, and Galina and Azalina lived in the same room. But on the surface, Qi Jia may look happy and harmonious, but when they were eating, she pinched Jiang Hai several times. Then at night, she and Jiang Hai did it many times, wanting to squeeze Jiang Hai dry. But let alone Qi Jia and Qi, even with Ai Xiaosi and Feng Yunchen, they were no match for Jiang Hai, so they lost in the end. When Jiang Hai woke up the next day, he found that these girls were already up. It was already a little late when he came back yesterday, so he didn't introduce the other people in the manor and Jiang Hai's territory. Today, he can introduce them. After breakfast in the morning, Jiang Hai took them around his manor. The cowshed, the horse shed, the swimming pool at the back, the dock by the sea, and the forest were all places they wanted to go. Of course, the most important thing was that Jiang Hai wanted to introduce his pets to them, so that they wouldn't hurt each other when the time comes. The two big dogs, Little Yellow and Xiao Bai, as well as Chirp, Bucktooth, White Hair, and Little Xia, went to the dock. When they went out to sea, Jiang Hai deliberately called out Big Fool and Roger, letting them see clearly that these people were his people in the future. But when he called out Big Fool gave Jiang Hai a pleasant surprise. He was surprised that Big Fool had grown in size again. The last time he appeared, he was already no smaller than the great white shark, but now it seemed that he was even bigger than the great white shark. That rat shark was also 6 meters long. It had indeed broken the genetic limit of living creatures, but it also enjoyed the most amount of spirit qi. The happy thing was that the rat shark and its babies were different from ordinary sharks, because the water quality here was good and there was plenty of food. Big Fool and his wife gave birth to 6 little sharks at one time. Jiang Hai was really surprised, but this is also a happy thing, adding more people to the family. Then he deliberately took them to the forest. Not far into the forest, Jiang Hai found that the water gloom had already woken up from its sleep. At this time, it was coiled up on a particularly large tree. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't have noticed it. After not seeing it for a winter, it was at least 2 times thicker than last year. Seeing it, Jiang Hai was not in a hurry and deliberately acted very close to these girls. The water gloom saw all of this and let it know that these people were also Jiang Hai's friends. However, these women didn't know what Jiang Hai meant. Seeing that Jiang Hai took them to the forest and deliberately came over to be very close, they thought that Jiang Hai wanted to do it here. Thinking of this, most of the girls were a little shy and didn't know what to do. But Wallace Shelley, whose seal was unlocked by Jiang Hai, had her eyes lit up. After looking around and making sure that there was no one else nearby, she directly took off her shirt in front of Jiang Hai. In an instant, 2 indescribable things jumped in front of Jiang Hai. Then, under Jiang Hai's surprised gaze, she squatted in front of Jiang Hai. Chapter 742. Hiss, who? As the hand that tightly pressed Jia Lian's head slowly loosened, Jiang Hai also let out a long sigh of relief. Cough, cough. As Jiang Hai loosened his hand, Jia Lian couldn't help but turn her head to the side, constantly retching. Some liquid mixed with saliva was spat out from her mouth. Looking at her appearance, Hualizi couldn't help but laugh. You need to practice more. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also smiled and put away some things that can't be described, then patted her butt, then took out a pack of paper from his pocket, pulled out a piece of paper and handed it over. Who wants to practice this, you bastard? Jiao Lian looked at Jiang Hai and said with an unhappy face. Hearing her laughter, the girls next to her couldn't help but laugh, but they didn't make a sound. Only Hualizi couldn't hold back and made a sound, but this sound was targeted by Jiao Lian, who looked at her with an angry face. Still laughing, you bastard, it's all because of you. Facing Hualizi, Jiao Lian didn't have a good temper. Hee, this thing really needs to be practiced. Facing Jiao Lian's roar, Hualizi just said with a smile. She had to admit that this Hualizi is really a wonderful person, not only in pleasing Jiang Hai, but also in terms of skills, or the grasp of human nature, especially Jiang Hai's character. She absolutely won't use Jiang Hai to suppress anyone. She belongs to the kind of people who will curry favor with the master, but won't offend people. She has to admit that she is really good. After hearing her words, Hualizi couldn't help but be speechless. Really, she is really unlucky. She took the tissue in Jiang Hai's hand, wiped her mouth, then stood up and looked at Jiang Hai with a bad mood. Just now in the forest, Jiang Hai's act in front of Jiang Hai was misunderstood by Hualizi. Then with Jiang Hai's degree of misunderstandings, he directly enjoyed Hualizi's service here, but Hualizi really understood Jiang Hai's wonderful person. After a while, she actually took the initiative to give up her position and let the others try it. Now among these people, except for Jialina, who was still a little arrogant towards Jiang Hai, the others have already accepted their fate. In fact, following Jiang Hai, as Azalina said, was really good. In fact, this was the most important thing, they won't be used as weapons by others. Jiang Hai can also give them a real identity, salary, a place to live, good food, good living, and not a bandit's money. In addition, Jiang Hai bought them, so many of these girls have already changed their minds. Therefore, they don't care about using their bodies to please Jiang Hai, so everyone tried it. Under Hualizi's guidance, they began to recall their previous practice with bananas, until Jialina. When Jialina saw that everyone was done, she was embarrassed to walk away. Although she hadn't done this before, she still restrained her temper and squatted down. Originally, she thought that she was just going through the motions, but who knew that Jiang Hai seemed to have recognized her. When she was about to retreat, he directly pressed her head, and what happened next was needless to say. Looking at these girls laughing and playing in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile with emotion. Being able to follow him, maybe it was really like what Azalina said, for these girls, it was a blessing. If he didn't buy them, they would most likely still be used as tools, weapons. They would be sent to those dark worlds for some people to use, and if they had different opinions, they would be beheaded. If they followed him, they might really be able to quickly change their minds. Maybe, I'll just quietly watch you pretend to be 13, I'll never interrupt you. At this moment, Jiang Hai's phone suddenly rang. While startling him, the girls who were still playing around couldn't help but stop what they were doing and look at Jiang Hai. After smiling at them, Jiang Hai looked at the caller ID on his phone. The caller was none other than Robbins Garcia. Hello, Robbins Garcia, what's the matter? He had just gone to the cowshed, and nothing had happened. Why was there a call now? Boss, the news just came. Some of the manor owners near us are already preparing to sell their land. Listening to Jiang Hai picking up the phone, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but say anxiously. In the beginning, Jiang Hai discussed with him and Edward Anderson to expand the area of the sea and the land. However, before Jiang Hai left, the area of the sea had been expanded, but the area of the land had not been expanded. As a result, the day after Jiang Hai came back, there was news that someone was going to sell their land, which made Robbins Garcia a little anxious. Someone is going to sell their land? Wait a minute, I'll ask. After hearing the news, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little confused and surprised. He then hung up the phone and called Bob George, who was his middleman. Hello, Jiang, are you back? When the call was made, Bob George picked up after a few rings, but there was some noise around him. When he saw that it was Jiang Hai, he was very excited. Yes, it's me, I came back yesterday. I heard that something happened on your side. Someone is going to sell their land? Listening to Bob George's words, Jiang Hai asked with some confusion. Listening to his anxious voice, Jiang Hai felt that he should know about this. Hey, yes, you've seen the person who wants to sell his land, Sakri Eddie. He has to sell his land to save his son. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Bob George sighed helplessly, walked to a slightly quieter place and said to Jiang Hai. What's the situation? Listening to Bob George's words, Jiang Hai frowned. What's wrong with his son? It didn't seem like it. When he left a few days ago, he went to Sakri Eddie's manor with Bob George. Compared to Jiang Hai's manor, his manor was 100% small manor. Well, it was actually not bad compared to the average manor. It was about 200 acres in size, which was about 1,600 acres. About 600 acres was for planting, and about 1,000 acres was for grazing. Jiang Hai had already told him before he left. Like Bob George, the land price was now $1,700, but because Winthrop was developing, the average price was $2,000. Jiang Hai increased it by 20%, so 1 acre was $2,000. The reason he offered this price was to ensure that he would take it all. According to this price, the total land price of Sakri Eddie's ranch was $480,000. Including the money for the house, he and Jiang Hai had agreed on $500,000. If he really wanted to treat something, it was impossible that he couldn't wait for a few days. Moreover, in America, the treatment was done before the payment. Speaking of which, it's his son who's disappointing. His son used to be a little ignorant and incompetent, but at most, he relied on his parents to support him. He didn't do anything out of line. A few days ago, he went to Kristen Adis's casino with his bad friends and lost $800,000 in one night. His father only saved a few $1,000s in all these years. How could he save him? At that time, the casino people said that as long as the ranch was given to them, they wouldn't have to pay back the $800,000. Hearing Bob George's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. His brain was quickly determining whether this was a conspiracy. Of course, a conspiracy was inevitable. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental that right after he left, a ranch owner's son was tricked into a casino and lost $800,000? Now he had to figure out whether this conspiracy was directed at him or the ranch. If it was directed at him, was the ranch owner trying to cheat Jiang Hai of $300,000, or was Kristen Adis's casino actually in cahoots with the Cartwright Company? Although Jiang Hai's brain usually didn't work, it still worked very quickly when it did. He quickly thought about the possibility of this incident. In the end, after hesitating, he decided to go and take a look first. If it was the former, then he would rather give up the ranch. Although he didn't care about the $300,000, if someone schemed against him, he wouldn't let it go so easily. But if it was the latter, and Kristen Adis was scheming against him, then Jiang Hai would definitely help. Don't worry, where are you? I'll go over now. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Bob George. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bob George told him where he was. It was Sakri Eddie's ranch. After hearing this, Jiang Hai said something to the girls around him and then hurried back home. What's wrong? Seeing Jiang Hai come back, Xiaofan, who was still in the room, couldn't help but ask with some doubts. Nothing, there's some trouble with buying land. I'll solve it soon. Azalina, wait at home, I'll take Belle with me. Seeing Azalina, who was still a little confused, Jiang Hai thought for a while and decided to take Belle with him. He had 2 generals, and one of them had to be reliable. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina thought for a while and pointed to the people behind Jiang Hai. Take them with you too. Jiang Hai knew that Azalina said this to make these women integrate with Jiang Hai faster. Hearing Azalina's words, these women's eyes were a little eager. This was also a sign of loyalty. Even Galina's eyes flickered a little, because she was also very interested in helping Jiang Hai solve the problem. There are too many people, I can't sit down. How about this, Du Ning and Galina come with me. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai felt that it was not a big deal to take them with him, but there were too many people, so Jiang Hai thought for a while and named 2 people. Jia Lina's ranking in the wolf pack was 1-1, while Du Ning's was 13-1. Both of them had the highest ranking. According to Hua Lizi, both of them were the strongest. Bringing along the 2 of them wasn't a bad idea. Okay, come in and get your equipment. After Azalina finished speaking, she said something to the 2. Then the 2 went into her room. As for Jiang Hai, he also went to get his desert eagle. Then he called Belle and told him to hurry over. Shortly after Belle arrived, Du Ning and Jia Lina were already ready to continue the fight. On the surface, there was no difference between the 2. Not to mention equipment, even the shadow of a gun could not be seen. After seeing the 2, Belle's face flashed a trace of seriousness, because his 6th sense told him that these 2 women were very dangerous. But considering that these 2 women were brought back by Jiang Hai, he did not say anything, but he was secretly on guard. At the same time, Du Ning and Galina also noticed Belle. They also felt the smell of blood from this person, which meant that this person had killed people before, so they could not help but pay attention. This is my employee, Belle Lester. He used to be in the Delta Force. This is Galina Vasilkaya, and this is Du Ning. They are all Azalina's former colleagues. Before I brought them here, they are now working for me. Let's go. Seeing that the 3 of them were a little serious, Jiang Hai said something to ease the tension. Then the 4 of them sat on Jiang Hai's war shield and went to Sakri Eddie's ranch. When they arrived at the ranch, they found Bob George and the others were circling outside. In addition to Bob George and Sakri Eddie, Carrie Clark, Cotton Harris, and the others whom Jiang Hai had met before were all here, anxiously waiting. The relationship between these people was actually very good. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were good friends. Although Americans rarely borrowed money, when a family was in trouble, these people would help. But the problem was that America encouraged spending money and discouraged saving money, so their families did not have much money. In total, they only had about 100,000, which was indeed a big gap. Even if they charged according to Jiang Hai's price of 500,000, it would still be 600,000. That's only $600,000. Compared to the 800,000 they owed, they still owe $200,000. Thinking about it, they felt a bit of a headache. Seeing Jiang Hai come over, these people surrounded him. Sakri Eddie also came over, but there was a bit of shame on his face. How's the situation? After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the people here and asked them. Sigh, this time I really don't have the face to say anything. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Sakri Eddie said with a look of regret. Chapter 743. Okay, I got it. After listening to Sakri Eddie's explanation, Jiang Hai waved his hand to stop him. Just like what Jiang Hai thought before, this matter indeed had nothing to do with Sakri Eddie. If it did, it would be because his family didn't pass the test and got screwed over by Cartwright Corporation and Kristen Adis. After all, making someone who didn't know how to gamble in the past lose $800,000 in one night was no joke. Other than making him lose so much that his eyes went red, he was probably drugged that day and became delirious. But now, it was useless for Jiang Hai to say anything. It was written in black and white that he did owe $800,000. There was nothing to say about this. Now I'll give you 2 suggestions. 1. Sell it to me at the original price. I'll lend you $300,000, no interest, just pay it back within 10 years. 2. Sell me your horses, cows, goats, and machines. I'll give you $850,000. After all, you still have to make a living. Jiang Hai looked at Sakri Eddy in front of him and thought for a moment before saying to him. After all, they were also involved in the conflict between him and Cartwright Corporation. It didn't matter if Jiang Hai lost some money because he could earn it back. The cows, goats, and machines here are only worth $150,000. You're giving me an extra $350,000. This can't be done. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Sakri Eddy said apologetically. He knew that he was set up, but he didn't expect Jiang Hai to be so open. You don't have to worry about that. Sell it or not. Looking at Sakri Eddy, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to him. Sell. Although he felt a little sorry for Jiang Hai, the United States still had to pay attention to business. Since Jiang Hai said he didn't need to worry about it, Sakri Eddy hesitated for a moment before deciding not to care. He gritted his teeth and remembered this favor. Although he probably wouldn't have a chance to pay it back, this time, it was all thanks to Jiang Hai. After he agreed to sell, the others saw how open Jiang Hai was and were also tempted. Originally, there was nothing wrong with selling the land to Jiang Hai. But human psychology, they all hoped that the land could be sold at a higher price, so they were all waiting. But now that Sakri's matter was exposed, they started to panic. That Cartwright company might not be like Jiang Hai, still thinking about their hometown and starting to play dirty. This time, with Jiang Hai here, not only could they settle this matter, but they could also get another 50,000 yuan. What if there was no Jiang Hai? Or if Jiang Hai didn't care? At that time, wouldn't their manors and ranches be gone overnight? Thinking of this, the scales in these people's hearts instantly leaned towards Jiang Hai's side. Jiang, I'll sell my ranch to you as well, according to your original price, $450,000. After thinking for a moment, Carrie Clark walked over and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious expression. Hearing him make up his mind, Jiang Hai also smiled. Of course, no problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the remaining manor owners couldn't wait any longer. Right now, these ranches were hot potatoes, so it was better to leave it to Jiang Hai to deal with. Almost instantly, the remaining ranchers sold their ranches to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai roughly calculated that he should have received more than 8,000 acres of land, which amounted to $19.2 million. He could afford this money. Now, the only one left was the Cotton Harris Ranch, which occupied 4,500 acres. If he bought all of this land, Jiang Hai's land area would reach nearly 25,000 acres. Now, Jiang Hai's original land area was 11,200 acres. Now, with the addition of more than 8,000 acres, it was nearly 20,000 acres. Including the medium-sized ranch and some small pastoral areas, almost 25,000 acres shouldn't be a problem. After this addition, if Jiang Hai wanted to raise as many as 50,000 cows in his manor, it wouldn't be a problem. However, having too many cows wasn't necessarily a good thing. Now, Jiang Hai didn't raise many cows, so he only provided them for the senior officials, although he earned a lot. But it wasn't to the point where it would affect the economy. If he raised too many cows, it would have a certain impact on the American economy. The Americans might not let a Wuxia man earn all their money. If it attracted more people's attention, the loss would outweigh the gain. Therefore, Jiang Hai's limit here was to raise 30,000 animals. Of which, 10,000 would be cows. This way, he wouldn't attract too much attention to himself. As for grass, he would just sell it. In any case, he had 2 huge markets to sell it to. At least, Jiang Hai sold grass well. He could earn hundreds of millions of dollars a year, or even more than $1 billion. This was pretty good. Okay, we're going to Boston anyway. Let's go sign the contract first, and then I'll transfer the money directly to your account. Seeing that the people in front of him had decided to sell the ranch now, Jiang Hai was very happy. After talking to them, they got in the car and drove to Boston. When they arrived at Moses Adams's lawyer's building, they explained their purpose as soon as they came in. Moses Adams couldn't help but secretly give him a thumbs up. Jiang Hai was really good at doing business. A $20 million deal was negotiated just like that. In fact, Moses Adams could see that the land in Winthrop would appreciate sooner or later. First, it was because of the tourism boom there. In a few years, the land there might cost $3,000 per acre. Now, it was absolutely suitable to buy it at $2,400 per acre. Second, although Jiang Hai wasn't in the real estate business, don't forget that he also knew that Jiang Hai sold grass. Just these 8,000 acres of land alone could bring Jiang Hai more than $1 billion a year. After deducting taxes, it was still a few $100 million. It might not be worse than selling cattle. It seemed that following Jiang Hai was a really good idea. As Jiang Hai's strength increased, his status was bound to rise as well. In a little more than an hour, the contract was signed. Jiang Hai gave them a month to move. Such a long time showed that Jiang Hai was very considerate. Normally, it would be a week, but he gave them 4 weeks, which was a month. This gave these manor owners and farm owners more time to sell cattle, sheep, machines, and other things that they didn't need. Of course, Jiang Hai would also accept some strong calves. However, Jiang Hai wouldn't accept breeding cattle or cattle of suitable age. Because of the beef that Jiang Hai sold, the cows needed to eat at Jiang Hai's ranch for more than half a year. But now, it was already the end of May, and they needed to eat for half a year. In December, the beef would not be easy to sell, and by next year, the cows would be too old. It should be known that in the United States, grade beef was 9 to 30 months old, which meant that it was more than 2.5 years old, and it wasn't worth much. Those who slaughtered cattle were basically only 2 years old. Now, the cattle of suitable age were at least 1 year old. If they were raised for another year, they really wouldn't be able to sell. Therefore, Jiang Hai wouldn't accept these mature cattle. After signing the contract, Jiang Hai directly transferred the money according to the amount of the contract they signed. After calling Thackeray Eddy, they called the bank to inform them. Generally speaking, when withdrawing money in China, they would already know. If they were withdrawing a lot of money, they would have to inform the bank beforehand. It was the same in the United States. However, Jiang Hai had the Centurion card. Even if it was 8 million, it wouldn't matter, let alone 800,000. After a call, Jiang Hai and the others went to withdraw $800,000. To be honest, this was the first time Jiang Hai saw $800,000. It was quite a big pile. 800,000, 11,000 stacks, 80 stacks. If it was placed in a box, it would probably be 2 boxes. Generally speaking, a box would be enough to hold $300,000 to $400,000. In the movies, a box could hold tens of millions. Unless it was filled with checks or other denominations. For example, euros. The biggest note was 500. A box that could hold $1 million could also hold 5 million euros. In the end, Jiang Hai and the others took a big bag and put the money in. Thackeray Eddy didn't dare to take the cash himself. He was a little scared. What if he lost it? It was Jiang Hai who took it. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't need to take it, as Belle would take care of it. With these things in hand, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at Kristen Eddy's casino in a few cars. When they parked the car and got out, there were already a lot of people who saw them. Looking at the aggressive appearance of this group of people, many guests who originally wanted to come and play chose to leave. Several guards at the door stood up solemnly and blocked the door. Looking at Jiang Hai's group coming over, one of the quick-witted ones had already gone in to report. "Please wait a moment. Why are you here?" Seeing Jiang Hai and the others coming over, a man in the lead stood up and blocked Jiang Hai with his hand. At the same time, he was sizing up Jiang Hai. He didn't seem to know Jiang Hai. While he was sizing up Jiang Hai was sizing him up too. He should be an Asian. If it was in terms of skin color, he was similar to the NBA star Duncan. He wasn't pure white, but he wasn't black either. He had a very vertical mohawk on his head. His whole head looked like it was hit by a wheel. Tattoos were all over his body. On his nose, ears, and even on his tongue, there were some accessories. Although there was a "please" in his words, his tone was very aggressive. It could be seen that they were the tyrants in this area. We're here to pay the ransom." Hearing that, Jiang Hai chuckled and waved at Belle. Belle came over with a bag. Jiang Hai also opened the bag a little bit. Seeing the bag full of green dollars, the man's eyes lit up. "Then, go in. I'm warning you, don't cause trouble." Raising his neck, the man let Jiang Hai and the others go in. At the same time, he flashed the pistol on his waist. The threatening smell was very strong, but Jiang Hai and the others didn't care, because they also had something on them. "You guys wait outside for a bit, Sakri, follow me in." But Jiang Hai didn't want to let too many people in, otherwise it would be troublesome. After glancing at Sakri, Jiang Hai just told him to follow them in. Even the rest of the people were waiting outside. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bob George hesitated and glanced at the others. If there was a conflict later, they could be the backup outside. That was also good. So he returned to his pickup truck. Just like that, Jiang Hai's group of 4, along with Sakri Eddy, walked into the casino. At this time, in a private room on the upper floor of the casino's boss, Kristen Adis, was laughing and chatting with 3 people. If Jiang Hai was there, he would recognize one of the 3 people. He knew one of them. It was Rosalind Cartwright, the owner of the Cartwright Company. In addition, there were 2 other people here. One was an Asian. Looking at the kimono he was wearing, Jiang Hai knew that he was an islander. The other was a white man. At this time, the 4 people were talking happily. At this time, the person who came in first ran up. "Boss, Sakri Eddy is here, but Jiang Hai is also here." Seeing Kristen Adis looking at him with questioning eyes, the underling immediately said in a low voice. Hearing his words, 2 of the 4 people who were originally very happy couldn't help but frown. The 2 who frowned were none other than Kristen Adis and Rosalind Cartwright. The 2 of them knew Jiang Hai's level. If this matter was related to Jiang Hai, it would be troublesome. However, the other 2 were still smiling and drinking red wine. "Mr. Akita, Mr. Smith, this." Looking at the 2, Kristen Adis called out with some hesitation. "What? Mr. Adis, are you scared?" Hearing Kristen Adis's words, the guy named Smith said with a smile. "Yes, a little scared. Jiang Hai's local power is very strong. If anything happens to him, the Massachusetts politicians will never let go of any of his enemies." Hearing Smith's words, Kristen Adis shook his head with a bitter smile. Since he could open a casino here, naturally he had someone above him. However, that person said that he could mess with anyone, but Jiang Hai absolutely could not be messed with. Now, this guy was the treasurer of Massachusetts. No one was allowed to touch him. He was a towering money tree. a Wuxia. No matter how strong his power is, he is still a Wuxia. Mr. Adis, don't be afraid. If anything happens, you still have us. Hearing Adis's words, Smith chuckled. Their target this time was actually Jiang Hai from the beginning. Chapter 744. Where's Kristen Adis? Call him out, we're here to redeem him. Walking into the casino, Jiang Hai also looked around. He had to admit that after seeing the casinos in Atlantic City, Kristen Adis's casino was just so. It was not big, with 2 floors, but it was transparent. There were some slot machines outside, and there were only about 30 gambling tables inside. Blackjack, baccarat, dice, there were all kinds of games, but the scale was really too small. There were also some private rooms on the 2nd floor for rich people to gamble there. Kristen Adis should be on the 2nd floor at this time. After walking into the lobby of the casino, Jiang Hai came to the middle. He didn't have the leisure and time to find Kristen Adis. Instead, he threw the money directly on a gambling table and shouted loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the guests here all looked at them. The security guards who were originally in charge of maintaining the place also came over and looked at Jiang Hai with some unfriendly expressions. At the same time, they also touched the weapons at their waists. Where's Kristen? I know he knows I'm here, call him out. Glancing at the people around him, Jiang Hai said with a look of displeasure. Wow, I really didn't expect that Mr. Jiang would come in person, I'm really surprised. Just as the security guards were hesitating, a voice laughed from above. Jiang Hai looked up and found that the people who came were none other than Kristen Adis and his son. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, he couldn't help but come down from the 2nd floor with a smile. There's nothing to be surprised about, I'm here to redeem him. Looking at Kristen Adis in front of him, Jiang Hai was sure that this guy was going to make things difficult for him, so he just smiled and said to him, let's go. Redeem him? I don't think I've ever bet on Mr. Jiang's people. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kristen Adis couldn't help but change his expression and said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also waved to Sakri Adis behind him, this is his son. Oh, it's little Adis, don't worry, he's fine, I said we're from the same hometown, although he owes me a lot of money. Seeing Sakri Adis stand up, Kristen Adis on the other side said with a smile. At the same time, he also said goodbye to the people behind him, then 3 people turned around and left. 2 people went to take little Adis, and the other person quietly went upstairs. It seems like he's going to look for the people from Cartwright Company and that islander. But they didn't notice that their movements were seen by Jia Lina and Du Ning. Looking at these people in front of them, the 2 couldn't help but walk to Jiang Hai's side and whisper. After listening to them, Jiang Hai waved his hand. We'll deal with whatever comes our way, it's that simple. Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai said seriously, but at the same time, he was also carefully guarding against them. He knew that these people would definitely not send little Jiang Hai here easily, because this is their most crucial move. Although he doesn't know why these people want to buy the nearby land, if they let little Adis go, then this land will have nothing to do with them. Although Kristen Adis still had a smile on his face, he was actually not very nervous. Because although he has a lot of influence in B City, but whether it's Jiang Hai or the other party, he can't afford to offend them. When the other party came to him, he was blinded by greed and agreed to cooperate with them. Now, if something goes wrong, Jiang Hai won't let him go easily. So now he has to divert Jiang Hai's attention, let them fight, it's better for him to be honest. At this time, the 2 people who went to take little Adis came out. They were carrying a young man. This young man looked similar to Sakri Adis, but it can be seen that he was really frightened. Although there were no injuries on his body, his face was pale, his eye sockets were deep, and there were heavy dark circles under his eyes. When he was pulled by the two people, he was still resisting because he didn't know where he was going. Until he saw Socrates standing in the crowd, he couldn't help but scream, "Dad," then he began to cry. "You bastard, you still remember that I'm your dad? You actually came to this place, you damn bastard, see how I'll deal with you when we get back." Seeing that his son wasn't injured, Socrates couldn't help but cry. But fortunately, he still held it in and scolded little Adis loudly. When little Adis heard his father's words, he couldn't help but nod. This time he also knew that he was wrong. Seeing that the person came out, Jiang Hai also glanced at Socrates, then he walked over to pick him up. "Wait a minute, he's here, where's the money?" But when Socrates was about to walk over, a voice came from the second floor. Then a person with a greasy hair and a powdered face appeared on the second floor. Behind him was a Japanese wearing a kimono, and Jiang Hai's old acquaintance, Rosalind Carlyle. But at this time, Rosalind Carlyle's gaze towards Jiang Hai was somewhat evasive. To be honest, if it wasn't for the attractive conditions this time, he really didn't want to be Jiang Hai's enemy. "Here." After glancing at the three people, Jiang Hai casually picked up the money and threw it to the security guard over there. After the security guard took the money, he counted it in front of Kristen Adis. In fact, it was quite easy to calculate. One stack was 10,000, a total of 80 stacks. They were all made with the bank's new tape, so there was no problem at all. After counting, the security guard looked at Kristen Adis and nodded. 800,000, that's not enough. Seeing the security guard counting the money, the white man upstairs couldn't help but laugh. 800,000 is not enough? Didn't you say 800,000? Hearing the words of the white man upstairs, Socrates roared on the other side. "Old man, what do you know? These few days, your son ate our food, stayed at our place, and played with our money. You don't want to pay? Do you think we're running a charity? Also, what about the interest?" Looking at Socrates, the man said disdainfully. You're too shameless. You told me yesterday, I came here today, and you still tell me this." Hearing the man's words, Socrates roared angrily, but after hearing his words, the white man on the second floor gently picked his ear. "Old man, you're the one who says everything, just tell me this money, are you going to pay or not?" Looking at Socrates in front of him, the white man laughed disdainfully. After blowing away the ear wax, he looked at Socrates and said, "Turn on your phone, record. Now, tell me, how much did he eat, live, play, and your so-called interest cost?" But at this time, Jiang Hai walked over. After shouting loudly to Galena behind him, Jiang Hai looked at the white man. The United States also had usurious loans, but no matter which country it was, the interest would always be worth it. The country won't allow you to borrow a dime today, but tomorrow it will become 100,000, no country will allow this kind of interest. This is no longer interest, it's fraud and kidnapping, so Jiang Hai directly asked him to turn on the video and asked him how much he wanted. "Hey, you want to stick your neck out?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the white man's face flashed a trace of shock, but also a trace of ferocity. He really didn't think that Jiang Hai would be so direct. He wasn't mentally prepared at all. "Yes, I'll be the one to stand out. Although I don't know whose pants weren't fastened properly and exposed you, I'll tell you this. Today, I'll protect Socrates' family. Tell me how much money you want. I'll give you as much as you want. It's just a matter of whether the federal government will let you spend it." Looking at the white man in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled disdainfully, sat on the gambling table next to him, and said with disdain. Jiang Hai has never been a person to be provoked. In terms of arrogance, he has never been afraid of anyone. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said disdainfully. "This is the United States territory, kid, if you're so arrogant, you'll die a horrible death." Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the white man's face was quite ugly. his hand holding the handrail of the second floor also became pale because of excessive force. "You're wrong, this is the territory of the rich, it depends on whether you're as rich as me, and whether you're willing to pay taxes here." Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai snorted disdainfully, "The United States has always been the paradise of the rich, isn't it? Then let's see if you can walk out of here today." Hearing Jiang Hai's disdainful words, the white man slapped the handrail. Instantly the security guards on the other side pulled out their weapons, and Du Ning and Galena also pulled out their prepared guns, pointing at the people in front of them. Jiang Hai also took out his huge pistol, and just like that, he waved it around. At the same time, he gave a look, and Du Ning immediately stopped the recording, and sent the video to the Winthrop police station. The people there naturally knew what to do. Looking at the scene of mutual hostility, in fact, the one who was most afraid was not the guests, nor was it Sakri Eddy, but Kristen Adas. One must know that he had worked hard for so many years to save up his current wealth. If something happened to Jiang Hai in his casino, he would immediately run away. He was sure that he would run away immediately. That Japanese had diplomatic immunity, that white man was not from Massachusetts, and Rosalind Cartwright was not the only person in the Cartwright Company. Moreover, he had not said a word from the beginning until now. When the time came, he might not have anything to do with it. The only one who was really unlucky was himself. His wealth was all ruined, everything was over, and he would have to live like a mouse in the future. "Wait a minute, put down your weapons. Mr. Jiang, this matter has nothing to do with me. Little Eddie owes me 800,000, I didn't say I would take the rest of the money, and there is no interest. Now I'll take the 800,000, and I'll let him go. As for the other matters, it has nothing to do with me." Thinking of this, Kristen Adas jumped out immediately, and then after giving the security guards around him 2 punches, he ordered all the security guards to put down their weapons, and then signaled the people over there to let little Eddie go. He did not want to get involved in this mess. Hearing their boss's words, the security guards did not dare to act rashly. After putting down their weapons, the 2 fierce-looking men also let little Eddie go. Sakri Eddy immediately pulled his son behind him, and slowly retreated to Jiang Hai's side. Seeing that the security guards had left, the only ones left with weapons were the bodyguards. To be honest, they were also a little scared. And after losing the absolute advantage in numbers, the white man's expression changed drastically, and he stared fiercely at Jiang Hai. If it was a battle just now, he was confident that with the advantage in numbers, he would have a 90% chance of making Jiang Hai stay here. But now, only about 50% of his men were left, and the most important thing was that he would be in danger. The 2 women beside Jiang Hai, from the way they held their guns, to the cold and handsome eyes, all proved that these 2 people were not to be trifled with. It was understandable. What kind of person was Jiang Hai? How could the bodyguards around him not be strong? And at the back was Bell, whose eyes had been flickering. To be honest, his reputation in this area was quite well known. The former members of the Delta Force, his protection ability might not be the strongest, but his military skills were much better than their bodyguards. Their bodyguards were most afraid of this Bell. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow, it was not something to be trifled with. In fact, they were thinking too much. If a battle really broke out, Jiang Hai might not have the confidence to protect Sakri Eddy and his son, but it would not be a problem for them to escape unscathed. Even if Kristen Adas's security guards were on their side, Jiang Hai also had the ability to leave. As long as Jiang Hai left, their nightmare would begin. Catch, catch, catch. At this moment, the sound of an alarm rang from outside. The police here were quite supportive. After all, Jiang Hai was their rich man, and now that their rich man was in trouble, they were naturally duty-bound to help. Looks like there's no fight, but this matter will not end so easily. Listening to the alarm, it gave the other party a chance to get out of the situation. As the white man waved his hand, his bodyguards also put down the guns in their hands. Then he shrugged casually and made a gesture to let them go, but his eyes were full of unwillingness. Chapter 745. Let's go. Glancing at this person, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and said to everyone. Then the 6 of them slowly left the place, but when they left, Jiang Hai's face was quite gloomy. Just like what that person said, this matter was not over. For Jiang Hai, this matter was not over either. Since he dared to provoke him, he would not let him off easily. For Jiang Hai, there was no such thing as a protagonist's mind. Since this guy dared to cause trouble for him, then don't blame him for being unreasonable. In fact, Jiang Hai had never been reasonable. Mr. Jiang, what's the matter? When Jiang Hai and the others left the casino, Bob George and the police came over to greet them. Especially the police, when they saw Jiang Hai, their faces were full of concern. Obviously, the police who came over to talk was also the leader here. He knew the value of Jiang Hai. At least in the eyes of the state government, Kristen Eddy's small casino was far less significant than Jiang Hai's existence. It's nothing. Sorry to trouble you. Hearing the police's words, Jiang Hai smiled and said indifferently. No trouble, no trouble. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the police immediately said a few words and then retreated with a smile. This time, it's all thanks to you. Otherwise, our family might have been torn apart. After seeing the police leave, Sakri Eddy, who had been supporting his son, came over and said to Jiang Hai with a sincere face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. After today, you'd better leave Winthrop or Boston, because you know, they won't dare to cause trouble for me, but they might cause trouble for you. Looking at Sakri Eddy, Jiang Hai said seriously. We understand. We're going to stay at the child's grandmother's house for a while. Her house is in New Jersey, so there shouldn't be a problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Sakri Eddy couldn't help but sigh. As the saying goes, an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. Now he understood the meaning of this sentence. After thanking Jiang Hai again, he helped his son into the car, then started the engine and drove in the direction of his home. As for Jiang Hai, after saying goodbye to the police, he also got into his car. But this time, there were only 3 of his own people in the car, Belle, Galina, and Du Ning. After going back, I'll carry out my first mission. I want to find out the details of the 2 people today, as well as their goals and objectives. How far have they gone, and whether there are any problems. Without looking back, Jiang Hai said calmly as he started the engine. But Belle knew that Jiang Hai's words weren't for him to hear. After following Jiang Hai for 2 years, he knew what to listen to and what to pretend not to hear. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Galina and Du Ning's eyes couldn't help but light up. In fact, they weren't very good at fighting. If it was purely a head-on fight, even Azalina might not be Belle's opponent, and the odds of winning was only 5 to 4. 5, if it were them, they might not have a 30% chance of winning against Belle, but if it was a life-or-death situation, their success rate of killing Belle was more than 80%. If Belle didn't know that he was the target, the success rate would be more than 95%. They specialized in this field. Although they could also be bodyguards, they wouldn't refuse to do these things as a sign of loyalty. After the car returned to Jiang Hai's manor, Du Ning and Galina went to find Azalina. After talking to her, Galina left with Ariel, Valentina, Beliak, and Wallace, Shelley. They drove away the 2 cars that Jiang Hai had parked at home, Traza's sports car and sedan car. Ray Carter and Du Ning were left in the manor. Jiang Hai didn't ask them what they were going to do, but Jiang Hai knew that they must have their own things to do. All he needed to do was to wait quietly in the manor. At the same time, he didn't stay idle. Since he had bought more than 8,000 acres of land, Jiang Hai was ready to start the renovation. Of course, it would be a month later. At the same time, he also asked Cotton Harris and the other manor owners if they had any plans to sell their manors. This time, Jiang Hai handled the matter very well, and it gave him a very high reputation among these ranch owners. Moreover, the other party also saw that the people of the Cartwright Company might not really want to spend money on them. Moreover, they couldn't beat Jiang Hai in spending money. Playing such a dirty trick made them, who originally had some hesitation, lean towards Jiang Hai. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai called the other manor owners. Basically, all of them agreed, except for Cotton Harris. But he also invited Jiang Hai to his manor in 3 days. At that time, they would discuss the matter of buying and selling this land in detail. Let's not talk about Jiang Hai first. As long as he spent enough money, this land would be his sooner or later. Galina and the others not only drove away with 2 cars, but also took away $100,000 from Jiang Hai. Of course, this was also given to them by Jiang Hai. The funds for the mission were deducted from this, and the rest was their bonus. Galina and the others were very happy about this. In the past, when they went to do missions, the organization would directly deduct their money. However, they didn't have much left in their hands. Jiang Hai was quite generous now. It was past 3:00 in the afternoon when they left. At around 9 o'clock in the evening, the 2 cars appeared one after another at a nightclub in Boston called Kana Siren. This nightclub was somewhat famous in Boston, but it wasn't the kind of big nightclub that celebrities would go to. It was just an ordinary nightclub. Among nightclubs, it could be ranked above average. The most famous thing about it was that the security here was excellent and the prices were good. Most importantly, the people who played here were people of a higher class, like Xiaofan. There were very few real local ruffians. It wasn't a very smoky nightclub. At around 9:00, there was a long line outside the nightclub. In the United States, nightclubs were like this. Those people had to check the age of these people to see if they could go in and drink. Of course, the men had to pay an entrance fee, but if it was a beautiful woman, naturally, there was no need for that. Just as these people were joking with each other to pass the time, Jiang Hai's terrace trotter slowly drove to the front of the nightclub. As the door of the sports car opened, a rather coquettishly dressed woman got out of the car. She had long blonde hair and was wearing a very short but rather hairy pink fur coat. Wearing a fur coat in the middle of the summer, well, except for the fur coat, the others didn't feel like they were backward. Instead, they were a little strong. Inside the pink fur coat, there was a pure white lace tuxedo. The lower body was a pair of denim hot pants that almost reached the thighs. On the feet was a pair of women's netted leather high heels. As soon as she got out of the car, her unusually full upper body made the shirt seem like it was going to explode. It was constantly shaking up and down. A diamond necklace was placed on the cleavage at her chest. As this woman got out of the car, whether it was the parking attendant next to her or the audience waiting to enter, they were all a little stunned. "Park the car for me," the stunning blonde said indifferently as she casually took out $20 from her bag, plus her car keys, and threw them to the parking attendant. "No problem, beautiful." After taking the car keys, the parking attendant's eyes were also shining. Not only because of the $20, but also because of this beautiful woman. Maybe tonight, he could also do it, he. As if seeing this person's thoughts, the beautiful woman glanced at him gently and then walked in step by step. "Wow, what did I just see? I'm going blind, man, let me in quickly. This nightclub has such quality goods. How come I haven't seen them before? What the hell? Damn it, I'm hard now, I want her tonight, I want her. Save it, don't you see what kind of goods that girl is? Do you think it's your turn? It's more like you like me." Seeing this woman walk in, the people outside exploded. They kept shouting like wolves, even the parking attendants were whispering. To be honest, they had been here for so many years, but this was the first time they saw such a top-quality goods. Hua Lizi really has some skills. just a few steps and she can make these guys so infatuated. At this time, in the street opposite the nightclub, in a Tra's car, Beliak couldn't help but whisper. Yes, the person who got out of the car just now was none other than Huali Shelley. Beliak, Valentina, Alfred, and Galina were all in the car, waiting for Huali Shelley to send them a signal. You want to, but you're not that fierce. Hearing Beliak's somewhat jealous voice, Alfred couldn't help but laugh. Damn, you say it like you have. Hearing Alfred say that, Beliak couldn't help but roll his eyes. At least it's better than yours, and my legs are longer. Didn't you notice that the boss especially likes to play with my legs? Hearing Beliak's words, Al said with a grin. Then he showed off his long legs, but he was despised by all the others. Enough, a joke is a joke, but don't forget the serious matter. Looking at the noisy back row, Jialina, who was sitting in the co-pilot seat, said. Then the people in the back temporarily quieted down, then they stared at their mobile phones and used binoculars to look at the nightclub in front of them. At this time, Wallace Shelley had also entered the nightclub. As she walked in, she instantly became the focus of the audience. The eyes of the men were like wolves and tigers. The eyes of the women were filled with jealousy and hatred, but Huali still maintained the smile on her face. Looking around the place that wasn't completely heated up at this time, Huali slowly walked to the front of the bar, sat there, and showed her hand with a luminous seal. Beauty, what do you want to drink? Looking at Huali's appearance, the bartender immediately greeted her, raised his eyebrows and asked. What do you have here? Huali held her chin, blinked her eyes cutely, and asked the bartender. Seeing this extremely sexy beauty make such a cute action, the bartender instantly had a reaction. If it wasn't for the fact that it was still early and the beauty opposite him was still conscious, he might have already pounced on her. He licked his somewhat dry lips and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Cough, I have basically all the cocktails here, I don't know what you want to drink. Looking at Huali, the bartender said seriously. Hearing his words, Huali chuckled. Looking at Huali's reaction, the bartender became even more hard. I'll have a cup of Bloody Mary. Although I don't drink blood, I really like that kind of seductive color. Squinting her eyes, Huali's big sparkling eyes narrowed halfway. She looked like a lazy kitten, which made people want to tease her. Too seductive. After shouting 3 times in his heart, the bartender went to the back of the bar and began to mix the wine. Usually, he would try his best to put as little wine as possible, but today, he put in a lot more wine. Although he didn't expect to win the beauty in front of him with a glass, but coming here to drink only 1 glass is not enough. Soon, the first glass of wine was mixed and placed in front of Hualizi. However, Hualizi didn't drink in a hurry. Instead, she picked up the cherry in the glass and slowly licked it in her mouth. This action instantly made the men who were still paying attention to her unable to bear it. Their eyes almost popped out. Looking at Hualizi, they really wanted to pounce on her. Sure enough, the first man couldn't bear it, came over with a glass of wine, and came to Huali's side. This beauty, are you waiting for someone? Looking at Hualizi, the man confidently smiled and asked her. I'm waiting for someone, but unfortunately, I'm not waiting for you. Huali gently glanced at him, then said with disdain. Hearing Hualizi's words, the man who came over couldn't help but blush. People like him who frequented nightclubs were very familiar with Hualizi's words. Hualizi's words meant that she came to have fun, but she didn't like him. Hearing this, the man shook his head and turned to leave. It was too embarrassing. He reckoned that there wouldn't be any results even if he pestered her. Chapter 746. How's the investigation going? After returning to Jiang Hai's manor, Jiang Hai climbed out of bed in the middle of the night and went to the study to look at the 5 girls. Especially when he saw Huali Shelley, he almost couldn't hold back. But fortunately at night, Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi squeezed him dry, so he was able to maintain his sanity. Basically, I've already investigated thoroughly. The information of those 3 people is here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Galina also brought a stack of information to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took a look at the information. The first one was Rosalind Cartwright, who Jiang Hai had met before. Rosalind Cartwright, gender, male, main job, director of Cartwright Company, president of Foreign Affairs Department of Cartwright Company, main job, managing Cartwright Company's participation in competitions, son of the current chairman of Cartwright Company, holding 3.7% of the company's shares, enjoys dividends. For this information, Jiang Hai already knew, so after a simple glance, he put it aside. Then, he focused his attention on the other 2 people. The second set of information was about the Japanese. Akita Shinichi, gender, male, age, 43, job, director of the Akita Corporation, holding 11.2% of the company's shares. A descendant of the Akita family is Japan's largest exporter of Wagyu cattle, with great autonomy and support from the government. Looking at this person's information, Jiang Hai's finger gently tapped on the information. It seems that they have found the source of him. The last one was the information of the white man. Mariong Smith, gender, male, age, 39, job, chairman of Smith Venture Company, holding shares of 17 listed companies, including Cartwright Company's shares. The company that holds more than 50% of the shares is Smith Manor, a ranch in Texas. Because it has a cooperative relationship with Akita Company, it owns the second generation of Wagyu cattle. Jiang Hai knew a little about this ranch. When he went to Texas to participate in the National Beef Cattle Competition, although he took the first few places, this company seemed to be among the winners. It seemed that they had their eyes on him at that time. Have you found out why they want to buy these lands? After glancing at the information of the 3 people, Jiang Hai frowned and asked with some doubt. They probably wanted to buy the land next to your manor and take the opportunity to study the inside of your manor. They wanted to buy it secretly, but they didn't expect you to want to buy it too. Their main money was for research. The money to buy the land was mainly invested by the Rosalind Cartwright Company. They didn't have as much money as you do, so they found Kristen Adis, invested in his casino, and asked him to do this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Jialina said calmly. As long as they wanted to investigate these things, it was naturally not particularly difficult. And there was no evidence, what did it matter? Anyway, Jiang Hai didn't care about these. He was not a person who wanted to go through the judicial process. Since these guys are looking for death, then let's play with them. Looking at the information of the 3 people in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. The specific work will be discussed tomorrow. With a wave of his hand, Jiang Hai motioned to Jialina and the others to go to bed first, and he went back to sleep. Early the next morning, after breakfast, Jiang Hai also arranged work for these bodyguards. The strongest, Jialina, stayed in Jiang Hai's manor to make up for the lack of high-end forces in Jiang Hai's manor. Wallace Shelley stayed in Jiang Hai's manor as a contact person, and several others were released by Jiang Hai. Al, Valentina, Leslie Carter, and Beliak all entered Jiang Hai's logistics publicity company. Of course, their main job was to protect the company, and secondly, to deal with the 3 people. But the main task was to help Jiang Hai find the dragon-shaped coat of arms. As for Du Ning, he had a separate task, which was to return to Wuxia and follow Qi Li. In the past, he didn't have any extra military power, and he wasn't conspicuous either, so he wasn't afraid that someone would harm Qi Li. But now it was different. Since the people of the island were going to make a move against him, then Qi Li's side must also be protected. After dividing the territory that day, Jiang Hai also spent the night with these girls who had just arrived. Early the next morning, these girls left Jiang Hai's manor. Some of them went to their company in Boston. Zheng Jin had already learned that Jiang Hai would send some people over. Moreover, these people were all in the nature of security. She wouldn't refuse people who protect her. After all, Jiang Hai's company was also a company worth over 100 million. Although he didn't have any shares, it would be very troublesome if he was tied up or something. So she wouldn't say anything. As for Qi Li on Hua Xia's side, after knowing that Jiang Hai sent a bodyguard to her, she was very happy. Whether Jiang Hai sent this bodyguard to monitor her, afraid that she would cheat on Jiang Hai, or really to protect her safety, this proved that she had a shadow in Jiang Hai's heart. Thinking of this, Qi Li, who usually had a cold face, felt warm in her heart, so she happily agreed to do Ning's protection. After these people were arranged, Jiang Hai didn't stay idle. After sending them away, he also left the manor. Accompanied by Belle Lester and Robbins Garcia, he went to Cotton Harris's ranch. Today was also the time they had agreed to discuss the sale of his ranch. On this side, Jiang Hai was carrying out his plan in an orderly manner. But the situation at Cartwright Company was much more complicated. After the man named Xiaofan of Fadric fell from the building, the whole company felt that something was wrong. After a day of investigation, the police basically came to the conclusion that this person committed suicide, or it could be said that he died in an accident, because all the evidence pointed to this point. In the lobby of the hotel, there was a video of him entering with his ID card, and there was also a video of him entering the corridor of the hotel. The front desk of the hotel also confirmed that the man did enter by himself, but there was a strong smell of alcohol on his body. The things in the room didn't change much. Although there was some dust on the clothes, it wasn't very obvious. When the body fell, it was wearing a bathrobe. Combined with the situation in the room, it was very likely that the man came to the hotel to wait for someone. Then, after getting a room, he came in and took a shower. Perhaps it was because it was a little late and a little cold, he went barefoot to close the window. In the end, he accidentally slipped and fell from the building. This was what the police confirmed after a day of investigation. Because this person fell and broke all the bones in his body, he didn't have any external injuries. The damage to his internal organs was also in line with the requirements, but the alcohol in his blood was a little excessive. And when they asked the man's colleagues who went to the bar with him that night, these people also said that he did drink a lot, because from what they saw, he drank 11 shots of tequila, drank beer with them, and danced with the woman on the dance floor. These people all saw it clearly and put it all together. In the eyes of the police, this could almost be concluded to be an accident or suicide, but the family of the deceased didn't think so. They were not satisfied with the answer given by the police, but they couldn't go to the police to ask for an explanation, because everything was reasonable and legal, and the police could ignore them. So this person's family rushed to the Cartwright Company to ask for an explanation. In the past 2 days, the Cartwright Company had been in a lot of trouble because of this matter. The people in the company were speechless, especially Rosalind Cartwright. He had been scolded recently. After all, the person who died was his deputy, and he had a plan to deal with Jiang Hai. He might go bankrupt again. This made him somewhat helpless and a headache. As for his 2 partners, Marvin Smith and Akita Shinichi, after that day's incident, they were all in trouble. These 2 holed up in a hotel in Boston, thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai. Anyway, no matter what others said, they were not satisfied. Akita Shinichi and Jiang Hai would not rest until one of them was dead. Cutting off one source of income was like killing one's parents. It was such a simple problem. Originally, in the world, only Japan's Wagyu provided top-grade beef, and as the biggest company, Akita Corporation, naturally made a lot of money in these years. But after Jiang Hai came out, at least the high-end beef market in the United States had nothing to do with them. Jiang Hai's beef was more delicious, and more beautiful. Because it was local beef, it didn't need to be like Japan's Wagyu, which included the transportation fee, so the price was better. If it was just that, they wouldn't be so worried. But the pasture that Jiang Hai sold to Luke Shan and Dean Feynman was the most troublesome thing for them. Luke Shan and Dean Feynman were different from Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai only had a total of more than 10,000 cows, and in the future, it would not be tens of thousands of cows. But these two livestock giants had more than 1,000,000 cows, and each cow had 5% top-grade beef. This would instantly fill up the local market. Just like Jiang Hai, because there was no transportation fee, they could save a sum of money. If they compare prices, they would not be able to compete with these people. Also, if these people could not finish their top-grade beef, they would sell it to other places. This way, their market share would decrease rapidly. They had already lost the United States, and they could not afford to lose more places. Cutting off one source of income was like killing one's parents. Obviously, although Japan did not say such a thing, the meaning was similar. Akita Masakichi's arrival was to target Jiang Hai. It was necessary to stop Jiang Hai, but the condition was to buy the pasture beside Jiang Hai. If they could find out how Jiang Hai's pasture became better, they would be happy. If they couldn't find out, they would think of ways to destroy Jiang Hai's pasture. For example, poisoning, building some abandoned pipes, polluting the land and groundwater. Anyway, this was the United States and not Japan. He would not feel guilty if he did this. As for Mariong Smith, he was a pure businessman. Take note, this was not a compliment. In ancient Wuxia, scholars, farmers, workers, and merchants had a low status. It was mainly because in ancient Wuxia those people thought that merchants valued profits more than righteousness. In the face of money, a person's bottom line would be infinitely lowered. Therefore, they were placed at the bottom of the social ladder. Other than money, they had nothing. In some dynasties, even the children of merchants were not allowed to take the imperial examinations. From this, it could be seen how low the status of merchants was. Of course, there were also many powerful merchants who had a bottom line. However, Mariong Smith was the purest businessman. For money, he could abandon everything, let alone his bottom line. He could abandon his country, his people, his self-esteem, his personality, his humanity, and his moral integrity. He could abandon everything except for money. That was also his principle. This plan was actually designed by him from the beginning. But when it was about to be completed, it was destroyed by Jiang Hai. It would be strange if he was happy. These days, they had been studying Plan B. Since Plan A had failed and Jiang Hai had received more than 8,000 acres of land, they had to focus on destruction. Thinking of this, their evil intentions came out again. But this time, Jiang Hai had already been prepared. And people who were familiar with Jiang Hai knew that he was never a good person. If others provoked him, it was impossible for him to repay evil with good. Don't forget that when the bodyguards left, they were given a mission. Moreover, Moses Adams's specialty was something that no one would remember. Jiang Hai didn't care about these trivial matters at this time. At this time, he had already arrived outside Cotton Harris's ranch. Seeing Jiang Hai's war shield drive over, Cotton Harris also walked out of the house with his family. Seeing Jiang Hai, Belle Lester, and Robbins Garcia get out of the car, he could not help but smile. He opened the door and opened his arms to welcome Jiang Hai. Looking at him, Jiang Hai also smiled and hugged him. Then, the two of them walked into the manor as if they were very familiar with each other. Of course, the two of them knew very well that they were not very familiar with each other. Including this time, Jiang Hai had only seen this man twice. And he probably saw him a few more times. After all, Jiang Hai was also a public figure in Winthrop. Chapter 747. Hey, Jiang Hai, you have to take a good look at my ranch. Cotton Harris said eagerly with his arm around Jiang Hai's shoulder. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai naturally responded with a "of course," and then the two walked into Cotton Harris's manor. They just sat in his house for a while and drank a cup of coffee. In less than 15 minutes, they came out again. Then Cotton Harris accompanied Jiang Hai to walk around his manor. Jiang Hai was also carefully looking at Cotton Harris's manor. With this look, Jiang Hai also saw a lot of problems. Cotton Harris's manor was a bit similar to the manor Jiang Hai came to before, but there were some differences. Before coming, Jiang Hai had naturally already checked all the nearby manors. In addition to Jiang Hai's own manor, Cotton Harris's manor was the largest manor nearby. Winthrop, after all, was located in Massachusetts, next to Boston. It was different from Texas and Montana. That place was vast and sparsely populated, and there were large grasslands, just like the Meng province in China. Just like in China, when thinking of raising cattle and sheep, the first place that came to mind was Mongolia, not places like the capital or Shanghai. Even if these places were in the suburbs, they would not be particularly large. Due to geographical and population restrictions, these things could not be developed vigorously in densely populated areas. As the northeastern corner of the United States, it was the same in the United States. Massachusetts was considered good. If it was New York, it was definitely impossible to build farms, manors, and ranches in the countryside. In addition to the town, Winthrop only had about 40,000 acres of land outside the town that could be cultivated and planted. More than 10,000 acres of land were on the right side of the highway. Basically, there were farms there. Some grew wheat, some grew vegetables, and some grew fruits. The land was not big and was divided into small pieces. More than 3,000 acres of land belonged to the town, and the remaining 8,000 acres were divided by 121 farms. On average, each farm had a few dozen acres of land. Indeed, the largest farm there was no more than 100 acres. However, the income was not small. After all, in the United States, there was no need to worry about the sales of vegetables and fruits, especially in the northeastern corner. The price was not worse than raising cattle. In the United States, vegetables and fruits were really profitable. As for wheat and other crops, they were the main source of food. With the government regulating, the profits would be lower, but there would not be any fluctuations. It was also a break-even business. Jiang Hai and the others were on the left side, which was about 30,000 acres in total. Jiang Hai's manor took up more than one-third of the land, which was 11,200 acres. This time, he bought another 8,640 acres. In total, Jiang Hai's land area had reached 19,800 acres. In addition, there was a coastal forest nearby, which was the first line of defense against sea winds or typhoons. About 2,000 acres of coastal land belonged to the Massachusetts government, and it was not allowed to be sold. Other than that, the land on the left side was about 6,700 acres. Cotton Harris's ranch took up two-thirds of the land, which was a total of 4,500 acres. Before Jiang Hai came here, one must know that Cotton Harris's manor was the largest manor in the city. He took the civilian route. Before Jiang Hai came, he also sold his cattle to Cartwright Company. This way, he could earn hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. However, because he had been herding cattle all year round, and in large quantities, the grassland on his manor was not very fertile. It was almost the opposite of his manor when Jiang Hai took over. Some places were even exposed. This was Jiang Hai's intuitive view of this manor. Whether it was the grass, the soil, or the cattle, they were all very different from his manor. Although this manor was only 4,500 acres, Cotton Harris raised 37,000 cows, which was more than the number of cows in his own manor. At the same time, he also raised 12 cowboys. However, there were no cattle dogs, and he relied entirely on the cowboys to work. It had to be admitted that this was really far from Jiang Hai's manor. However, this was also the truth. In the United States, ordinary ranches were like this. It was not to say that they raised a full load of cattle, but they could raise more. They were different from Jiang Hai's ranch. The cattle raised by Jiang Hai were all the best, but the cattle raised by Cotton Harris's ranch could only earn $80 to $100 per cow. It was precisely for this money that they raised as many cattle as possible. As for the cowboys, it was to feed them with pasture. Even in midsummer, their cattle were not enough to eat, so they had to import pasture. Although cattle dogs were good, they did not know how to take care of cattle. It was precisely because of this that people like Cotton Harris did not raise cattle dogs. After a simple glance, Jiang Hai and Cotton Harris returned to Harris's house. Next, it was time for a face-to-face negotiation. I'm sure you know that the price I'm offering is from the folks in the village. I won't cheat you. $2,400 per acre, and the house will be calculated separately. If you agree, we can sign the contract now. Sitting on the sofa, Jiang Hai waited for Cotton Harris's wife to bring him a cup of coffee. Jiang Hai took a sip and then said to him. He went straight to the point. He did not like to beat around the bush. I've heard about this price. I can accept it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cotton Harris nodded and said seriously to Jiang Hai. To be honest, he knew that he had really made a lot of money at this price. If he sold it, he would only get $1,700 per acre. Jiang Hai's price was nearly 40% higher. What was there to be dissatisfied with? If Jiang Hai did not sell it, then he would be the one to lose. 4,500 acres, $2,400 per acre, that would be $8 million. If this money was taken to places like Texas or Montana, he could buy a ranch of 8,000 acres. If he went to Mexico, he could buy a manor of more than 10,000 acres. This was the reality. The land here was too expensive. Of course, if he went to California, it would probably be about the same size. I won't beat around the bush. Your ranch is a total of $9 million. What do you think? Looking at Cotton Harris's expression, Jiang Hai knew that it was impossible for him not to be moved by this price. Of course, he could not rule out the possibility that he would raise the price. But if that was the case, then Jiang Hai would just leave. He did buy these lands to make money, but he would not be a fool. I'm very satisfied with the money for the house and land. I agree in this regard. But my cows are also the reason why I must meet you today. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cotton Harris had nothing to be dissatisfied with, but after hesitating for a moment, he still said it. Oh? What's wrong with cows? Before Jiang Hai bought these lands, he had clearly said that he did not buy cows. The reason was that Jiang Hai had told him before. He had no use for these cows. If he modified them, he would miss the time to sell them. If he did not modify them, these cows would be useless in his hands. After all, he did not go for the low-end market. Now, Cotton Harris's words made Jiang Hai look at him. If he insisted on buying his cows, then Jiang Hai would have to consider whether to buy the manor or not. My cows were originally signed to the Cartwright Company and were sold directly to them. But you know the situation now. If I sell the land to you, the Cartwright Company will not buy my cows. I can't just let my cows rot in the shed, right? I'm looking for you this time because I want to trouble you to help me think of a way, or help me sell these cows. I'll give you a discount. The money to buy the land, $10 million will do. If you can't think of a way, I want to ask you to give me a few more days until I sell these cows. Looking at Jiang Hai, Cotton Harris said with some hesitation. In fact, he said this to borrow Jiang Hai's connections. He heard that Jiang Hai had a relationship with the Walmart Group. Compared to the Walmart Group, the Cartwright Company was just a small dot. If he could use this opportunity to get in touch with the Walmart group, it would be good news for him. So after he finished speaking, he also looked at Jiang Hai with some hesitation. After listening to his words, Jiang Hai also thought about it. It was just a simple bridge. He didn't care because he knew that Pra Walton was a businesswoman. She wouldn't give him face on this matter. Moreover, he didn't need her to give him face. So he stood up and called Pra Walton first. After understanding the situation, Pra Walton didn't say anything. She directly asked the people who usually bought meat from the Walmart group to call Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also gave the phone to Cotton Harris on the other side. After explaining the situation, the people from the Walmart group were willing to come and take a look. If there was no problem with the meat, then it didn't matter if they accepted the meat because they also needed to buy meat everywhere. Thank you very much. On the phone, after a preliminary agreement was reached, Cotton Harris said to Jiang Hai with excitement. The Cartwright Company was originally a middleman. Now that he had eliminated the middleman, he could make more money. You're welcome. If the quality of your meat doesn't pass, then I can't help it. I can't let others treat this inferior meat as good meat. I think you also understand what I'm talking about. Looking at Cotton Harris's eyes, Jiang Hai also smiled. He wasn't going through the back door. To be exact, he didn't have any back door. Of course. I've been doing business for so long and my beef has never had a problem. This time, I'm really grateful to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cotton Harris on the opposite side didn't care. He laughed loudly and said, "Then our business." Seeing that Cotton Harris had solved the biggest problem, Jiang Hai also said to him, "Absolutely no problem. Just like what I said just now, $10 million. The land and the house are all yours. I can also help you. I'm quite familiar with the rest of the manor owners." Hearing Jiang Hai mention the land, Cotton Harris, who didn't have any worries this time, immediately made a verbal agreement with Jiang Hai. Then, he took Jiang Hai to several nearby businesses that hadn't signed a contract with Jiang Hai yet. Originally, these people weren't familiar with Jiang Hai, so they were hesitant about selling their ranches. Now that Harris and Jiang Hai came and talked about the price, these people were tempted. That afternoon, Jiang Hai and a group of more than a dozen people went to the Moses Adams law firm in Boston. It was Penelope Dahl who received them. After signing their respective contracts, these people's land would all belong to Jiang Hai. In the following month, they would have a month to find a new place and sell their belongings. After a month, Jiang Hai would collect the house. After these things were clearly written in black and white, these people started to move. The foreigners didn't have the idea of eating, drinking, and celebrating after the contract was signed. After signing the contract, they went back to prepare. Jiang Hai was the last to leave. Seeing that everyone had left, he pulled Penelope Dahl's sleeve. "Has Moses Adams started to act?" Looking at Penelope Dahl, Jiang Hai felt that Moses Adams hadn't appeared today. That was why he asked. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penelope Dahl also looked around. After confirming that there was no one else, she nodded gently. "Mr. Adams told me to get the money ready, but it's too much. $100 or $200 million should be enough. This time, not only can he help you solve the problem, but he can also help you get a deal." Hearing Penelope's words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows. Moses Adams was best at business mergers and acquisitions. Now it seemed that this guy was really interesting this time. "Tell him not to worry. I still have $400 million in cash in the bank. Tell him to do a good job for me." Thinking about the cash in his bank, Jiang Hai smiled. Indeed, if it wasn't calculated by net worth, but by cash, the number of people in the world who could use more cash than him was really rare. This was because other people were afraid that if they had too much money in the bank, it would depreciate and have no value. But Jiang Hai just liked to see a lot of money in the bank. This was a habit he brought over from China. Chapter 748. Aren't you going out these days? Sitting on the sofa at home, Jiang Hai was lying on Ai Xiaoxi's long legs while scrolling through his mobile phone. Qi Jie, who was sitting on the ground at the table next to them, was eating grapes. She casually stuffed one into Jiang Hai's mouth. Today, there were only 7 people in Jiang Hai's villa: him, Qi Jie, Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, Qia, Delina, and Marian. Aphrodite and the others ate breakfast this morning. After tidying up, they went to the wine manor. The grapes there had already started to bear fruit. Because they didn't use pesticides, plus the nourishment of Jiang Hai's spirit qi, the grapes were quite attractive to insects. So they had to manually get these insects down and kill them. Of course, the chickens raised by Jiang Hai also came in handy at this time. Whether it was insects in the vegetable field or in the wine manor, these chickens were the main force in eliminating pests. However, these chickens didn't only eat insects, they also didn't let go of the seedlings of the vegetables and grapes, so they had to look after them. Azalina left with Galina and Wallace in the morning. According to them, they had to be familiar with every place in this land. With Azalina accompanying Jiang Hai, he didn't have to worry about his pets attacking them. Because he had already introduced them to each other last time, and Azalina and the others were very familiar with them. Probably, who knows? If there's nothing else, I won't go out. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also raised his head and looked at her, then gently shrugged, indicating that he didn't know very well. Indeed, he really didn't know if he would go out or not. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would find trouble for himself. He could endure loneliness. He didn't want to pursue excitement, and he didn't have any dreams, so he had always been a salted fish. His original goal was to expand the fishing ground and the manor, and he had already achieved it recently. Jiang Hai really didn't have anything to do. Oh, it was necessary to find trouble with those 3 guys and find the dragon seal. However, Jiang Hai wasn't in a hurry. As for the dragon-shaped seal, he would only go after he had found it. As for dealing with those 3 people, there would naturally be people who would deal with them. Jiang Hai was only the one who paid the money, the rest had nothing to do with him. You are so lazy all the time, is it really good? It seems to me that you are running out of things to do. Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Jie glared at Jiang Hai. In fact, for Qi Jie, she liked Jiang Hai. This was inevitable, but deep in her heart, she still liked the kind of man who was vigorous in command. At least, he had to be domineering, have his own goals, and have his own ambitions. At least before she met Jiang Hai, her dream lover had always been the kind of elite who stepped on colorful clouds and flew all over the sky. When he was awake, he would control the world, when he was drunk, he would lay on her knees, and when he waved his hand, the wind would surge. He was loyal, capable, and ambitious. She had also fantasized before that if she met such a man, she must be with such a person and fight with him. If you won, she would accompany you to rule the world. If you lost, she would accompany you to make a comeback. But reality proved that in fact, being ordinary was the most realistic. Look at Jiang Hai, this guy, greedy, lustful, not hardworking, without dreams, without ambitions, without ideas, lived a life that counted day by day. Such a person, to be honest, was really quite attractive. Jiang Hai is plain, rich, and has a gentle personality. Most importantly, although he already has a lot of women, being with him gives one a sense of security. Just like Xiao Longnu, when a man is willing to die for you, then nothing else matters. Jiang Hai is a man who is willing to die for you, then nothing else matters. Qi Jie was very sure that if she was in danger, Jiang Hai would definitely be duty-bound. And most importantly, Jiang Hai didn't seem to be an ordinary person. She was very clear about her sister's illness. It was really amazing that Jiang Hai could cure her sister. With the above characteristics, plus Jiang Hai's mysteriousness, it was impossible to say that it wasn't seductive. At least, Qi Ya and Qi Jia fell for it. After eating a grape, Jiang Hai glanced at Qi Jia and said with a smile, "I've never thought of being a protagonist. What's there to think about? I don't plan to dominate the world, nor do I plan to establish a business empire. It's good enough to just live like this, isn't it?" Then, as he scrolled through his phone, he thought that he really didn't have the fate of being a protagonist. Jiang Hai never thought of himself as a protagonist, because being a protagonist was actually something that could be traced. If you want to be a protagonist, first, it's fate, second, it's luck, third, it's feng shui, and fourth, it's name. When it comes to fate, Jiang Hai didn't grow up in an orphanage, nor was he an abandoned child of a big family, nor was he the descendant of a high official, nor was he from a rich family. He lived in a very ordinary world since he was a child. He was just one person among all living things. And he didn't have much luck. Other than the matter of the Dragon Balls, everything he did was similar to the life of an ordinary person. He didn't meet any mysterious old grandpas who helped him without asking for compensation, nor did he meet any female protagonists who fell in love at first sight. Feng Yunchen didn't count, because she was interested in Jiang Hai's money from the beginning. Well, now she was actually more interested in Jiang Hai's money. He didn't have a meal, but he met some hooligans who saved the damsel in distress. He didn't buy water, but he met the son of an official who bullied the weak. No one was there to pose for him to slap in the face. If he wanted to slap in the face, he had to find someone and arrange it himself. The third was feng shui, which was even more nonsense. He didn't know feng shui, the 5 elements, martial arts, internal strength, hard body skills, or any other nonsense. He didn't know anything about it, and he didn't have any seniors or elders who knew these things. It was all nonsense. He didn't even know where his grandfather was buried. The fourth was the name. This was also the easiest way to determine whether a person was a protagonist or not. According to the way Jiang Hai had read so many novels in the past, at the beginning, the protagonist must be called Ao Tian or something. The surname Long was very important. Later, this kind of genre was not popular anymore. The surname had to be Qin, Lin, Shao, or a compound surname. Xianyuan, Gudu, Dongfang, Qin Feng, Lin Feng, Shao Yan, Lin Dong, and so on. It could be said that Jiang Hai didn't have any of the 4 characteristics to be a protagonist, so he never thought that he had the fate of being a protagonist. The most important thing was that he didn't have any ideas or goals. Life was like a salted fish, muddling along. This was his principle. For now, this principle wasn't bad. At least it didn't make Jiang Hai seem so dazzling. If there's anything that makes Jiang Hai and the word protagonist, it's probably his Dragon Balls. At this moment, his heart skipped a beat. He knew that another piece of his scales had grown. When he was bathing last night, he took a look and found that his scales were about to reach his tail. There were less than 100 pieces of scales left to reach his tail. According to what he knew these days, he should evolve again in about a week or so. Jiang Hai had changed a lot during the previous evolutions, and there were also negative effects. Jiang Hai found that he seemed to be increasingly unable to control his desires in that aspect. In the past, when he met a woman, he would think about it and hesitate. But now, as long as a woman he fancied appeared in front of him naked, he couldn't help it. This was indeed a big problem. One had to know that at most, he only wanted to keep 2 or 3 women by his side. But now, it seemed that the number was increasing, and he was about to lose control. Jiang Hai knew that this was the effect of the Dragon Balls. But how to restrain this thing, Jiang Hai didn't know. The Dragon Balls made his body stronger and stronger, and his spiritual energy became richer and richer. At the same time, his restraining power in this area was rapidly weakening. Originally, men had some problems in this area, but now the problem was even bigger. But it was impossible for him to not evolve, and he didn't know how to not evolve, because every time the scales were fully grown, he didn't do anything and directly entered the state of evolution. This was not something he could control. But thinking of this, Jiang Hai looked at Qi Jia and said faintly, "I just said that I might not go out. Now, I might have to take back my words because I might go out in a week." "Oh? Go out to do what?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jia asked with some doubts. "Just now, he said that he wouldn't go, why is he going out again?" "This time, there is a very important thing to do, but I can't tell you. I will go out by myself, and I probably won't hear from you for a few days. But don't worry, I will be back in a few days," Jiang Hai said plainly after eating another grape. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana and Marian in the distance looked at each other. Obviously, among these people, they know Jiang Hai the best. After all, when Jiang Hai evolved for the first time, they were by Jiang Hai's side. Now when Jiang Hai said this, they couldn't help but think of Jiang Hai's first evolution. They are very sure that Jiang Hai going out this time should be related to this, but they didn't say anything. "What are you doing, being so mysterious? But let me tell you, if you dare to bring a girl home again, I will cut off your big brother." Looking at Jiang Hai's mysterious look, Qi Jia didn't ask much, because she also knows that Jiang Hai has a lot of things to do. "Do you have any thoughts after coming back?" Qi Jia continued to ask Jiang Hai after glancing at him again. "After coming back, it should be about time to expand the fences and sprinkle the fish seedlings in the fishery." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a while. Although it should be summer when he comes back, this is also the time to sprinkle the fish seedlings. Sea fish are different from the fish in the river. Sea fish can also be sprinkled in the summer. The most important thing is that Jiang Hai can guarantee the survival rate of these fish seedlings. In addition to these two things, Jiang Hai thought about it carefully, and it seems that there is nothing else to do. If it's closer, he will have to wait until the end of September to pick grapes. Oh, and at the beginning of September, he will have to buy more cattle. Of course, after expanding the manor, he still has a period of time to be busy. For example, he will expand the spiritual energy in all his pastures, but he doesn't have to worry about this. He will expand it a little bit every day. Anyway, they are not in a hurry to sell these grasses for money. Hearing that Jiang Hai finally remembered that there are some serious things to do, Qi Jia didn't ask much. "Come, try the cookies I made." At this moment, Chia's voice came from the kitchen, and then she walked out with Feng Yunchen, carrying a plate of freshly baked cookies. Recently, Chia's biggest hobby is to study how to make food. Originally, this was what she was best at, and she also knew that this was the only thing she could do for Jiang Hai. As soon as the cookies were served, Jiang Hai also sat up directly, picked up a piece and threw it into his mouth, and then his eyes couldn't help but narrow. Jiang Hai has a pure child's taste. He likes to eat sweet and sour, and the milky flavor is strong. Obviously, Chia is very familiar with Jiang Hai's taste. The cookie made has a particularly strong milky flavor. After Jiang Hai took a bite, he closed his eyes, indicating that he was very satisfied. "It's good that you like it." Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Chia also smiled, then sat next to him and picked up a cookie to eat. Different from Jiang Hai's happy and harmonious atmosphere, on the other side of the Cartwright headquarters, the directors of the Cartwright company gathered again, but this time, they didn't talk about Jiang Hai, but about their company's shares. Recently, an unknown force has been suppressing the Cartwright company's shares, causing the company's shares to fluctuate. Moreover, there is news that the United States is about to open a beef dumping port, so the price of beef in the United States will increase. The specific notice will be in about 2 months. As soon as this news came out, the original suppliers of the Cartwright Company, that is, the ranchers, instantly covered their beef tightly. 2 months, it's not like they can't wait. Except for some beef that is 28 or 29 months old that must be sold, the Cartwright Company can't get the rest of the beef. Although they also said that this is fake news, these ranchers are willing to wait and see. There were no beef cows in the warehouse, and with someone suppressing them in the market, the Cartwright Company's shares had indeed been shaken recently. At the beginning, it was $13, but that afternoon, it was only $29. Today, it even fell below $18 to $97. Although it was only a drop of $4, nearly 1/5 of the company's market value had evaporated. If you had $100, you would feel heartache if it was reduced by $20. Moreover, these people each had at least tens of millions. If $50 million was reduced to $10 million, it was enough to make people so depressed that they wanted to bang their heads against a wall. So today, these directors were all here to ask for an explanation. Chapter 749. In fact, it wasn't just the Cartwright Company. Marion Smith's company was also in a lot of trouble at this time. However, unlike the Cartwright Company, his company accounted for the largest proportion, so he could still suppress this matter. On the contrary, the Akita family was the least affected in this matter because their family's corporation was a family-run business. Therefore, there were no scattered shares or the like. Moreover, Moses Adams's hand couldn't suppress them there. However, the two companies in the United States were troublesome enough. Recently, Moses Adams had been staying in New York. At this time, no mistakes could be made. Every day, Hua Lizhi would receive a report on his operation. Of course, this was not made by Moses Adams. Moses Adams was also using the name of Jiang Hai's Tinglong Company. Therefore, those who had entered the Tinglong Company also had the responsibility to supervise the flow of Jiang Hai's funds. These reports were all made by Biliak. Of course, they didn't know much about finance, but she was still clear about what he did. Wallace Shelley would organize these things into a report and show it to Jiang Hai first. Then, she would study his subsequent work and so on. He had to admit that with Galena and the others, Jiang Hai really saved a lot of trouble. Originally, he just wanted to buy them. First, it was to make Azalina feel better. Second, it was to protect his own safety, to protect Chi Li's safety, and to protect the safety of his business. By the way, they could also help him find the situation of the dragon-shaped badge, but now it seemed that their role was much greater than he imagined. Jiang Hai now had some regrets. If he had known earlier, he would have bought more, but it was useless to regret now because there was no one for sale. Time passed by minute. Sometimes, one had to admit that a dull life always made it easy for people to forget the time. For example, Jiang Hai's life was almost the same every day when he stayed at home. It was really easy for people to forget the time and the date. In this way, 6 days passed unknowingly. On this day, Jiang Hai felt a little hot when he got up in the morning, so he went to take a shower. After coming out, he found that the scales on the dragon's tail had almost swelled to the top. There were only about 8 scales left. If he continued to stay in the manner, he might have to forcibly evolve at 4:00 in the afternoon. This couldn't be done because Jiang Hai didn't know how long he would be in a coma this time. But according to the time of the previous 3 evolutions, today's evolution would take at least a week or so. So after hesitating for a moment, he called the people in the room over after breakfast and explained his situation to them. "I'm going out for a few days. I'm not very sure about the exact number of days. I'll have to rely on you for the next few days." Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said directly to them, Although they were already mentally prepared, Qi Jia and the others were still very worried about Jiang Hai leaving and not knowing where he would go. They weren't worried about Jiang Hai going out to fool around. Although the flowers at home weren't as fragrant as the wildflowers, there were too many flowers at home. Wildflowers weren't that attractive. But now that Jiang Hai said that he was going to leave and then disappeared, they were a little worried. "Boss, do you want me to accompany you?" After hesitating for a while, Jia Lina looked at Jiang Hai and said to him. To be honest, although Jia Lina has a cold face all day long and doesn't say anything when looking at Jiang Hai, in fact, she is very lonely deep in her heart. The only two people she can rely on now are Azalina and Jiang Hai. Now that Jiang Hai is going to leave, she doesn't know what to say. "No, I'll be fine." After smiling at them, Jiang Hai also rejected Jia Lina's proposal. In fact, the less people know about this, the better. Although the people who live here more or less know that Jiang Hai is a little strange. But if Jiang Hai doesn't want to say it, then they won't reveal it. This is also a kind of tacit understanding between them. Only Jia Lina and Hua Lizi, who have just arrived, are still very curious, but Hua Lizi understands these things very well. If everyone doesn't ask, then she won't ask, but Jia Lina can't help but say a few more words, but when she heard Jiang Hai say that there is no need, then she has nothing to say. Seeing that everyone has agreed, Jiang Hai also kissed their cheeks one by one. Then, he packed up a few sets of clothes and drove away. When he got into the car, he took a look. He was still 6 scales away from leveling up. After he left this place, he would only level up by 2 scales a day. There was still time. Let's calculate it according to 3 days. This time, he was thinking about where he should go to level up. It's a bit difficult to find a place in 3 days. The last time he went to a hotel in New York to level up, to be honest, he almost died. And Prawalton broke in. Fortunately, he had finished leveling up at that time, otherwise, it would be quite troublesome. This time, he doesn't know how long it will take to level up, so he can't go to a hotel. But if he doesn't go to a hotel, where can he go? This is also a very troublesome matter. It is not safe in the wild, but if he is in the water, what if his ability disappears when he levels up? He will drown. Go to a place where there is no human habitation? But where is the place where there is no human habitation? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai still can't think of a good place to level up. It is really worrying. These days, when he was at home, he also thought about it, but to be honest, after thinking about it for a long time, he still can't think of a good place to go. Where can I guarantee my safety, and I won't be disturbed by others, and I won't attract others' attention? It is very troublesome to expose my situation. Forget it, let's go to the forest first. This time, I will go into the forest and see if there is a place where I can safely stay for a week. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai decided to go to the forest first. It was early summer, and the weather was very hot. However, the game was not very plump yet. It was not the time to hunt in autumn. Most of the animals were in heat in spring, and now was the time to give birth to cubs. Therefore, during this period of time, the U.S. government also banned the burning of guns and hunting. Leveling up in the forest may be a good choice. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai can't help but start the engine and drive towards the Alabama mountain range in the distance. But halfway, he can't help but slow down because at this time, not far in front of him, a pickup truck stopped in the middle of the road. After a while, a woman wearing a blue short-sleeved t-shirt and a pair of jeans was kicked out of the truck. At the same time, she was carrying a big suitcase. Then, the woman took the suitcase and kicked the door of the pickup truck. She then cursed loudly, but the pickup truck didn't care about the woman. Instead, it drove straight away. Then, the woman didn't complain too much. Instead, she carried her suitcase and walked forward along the highway. To be honest, Jiang Hai actually didn't like this kind of thing, but he didn't care too much about it. But he looked at the woman's black hair and skin that is more yellow than white people. He wanted to go over and ask. Maybe because he is about to level up, Jiang Hai is in a good mood, so he wants to see if he can do a good deed every day. Hello, is there any problem? Jiang Hai drove the car to the woman's side and asked her. I don't speak English, and I don't have any money. Sorry. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman raised her head and glanced at Jiang Hai. After hesitating for a moment, she spoke to Jiang Hai in pure Mandarin, and in this Mandarin, there is a hint of northeast accent. Wuxia. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai asked her with some doubts. When he looked at this woman just now, he felt that she should be Wuxia, but he didn't expect to come over and ask. She is really Wuxia. You are also Wuxia. Hearing Jiang Hai's authentic Mandarin, the woman here also looked at Jiang Hai strangely. Hee, we are all from the same hometown. Come on up, where are you going? I will send you for free. After confirming that they are all Wuxia, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He smiled and waved to the woman, motioning her to come up first. Since she took this road, it means that they are likely to be on the way. Moreover, Jiang Hai has enough time, so he doesn't have to worry about leveling up here in a while. Then, I'm really sorry. After hesitating for a moment, the woman thought about it. The place she wants to go is really far away. Now, without Jiang Hai's help, maybe in a while, she will have to hitch a ride by herself. Instead of that, it is better to trust her fellow countrymen. After throwing the luggage into the trunk, the woman also sat in the front passenger seat. After fastening her seatbelt, the car slowly started to move. At the same time, Jiang Hai was also looking at this woman. To be honest, this woman was really hard to see just now. Now that she got in the car and took a closer look, she was really a very beautiful woman, but unlike those young girls, she didn't have makeup on her face, so her skin was a little rough. Her straight long hair was tied directly behind her head, leaving a strand of hair on her forehead. The oil on her head and the sweat on her face were flowing like a stream at this time. She was wearing a blue t-shirt that wrapped around her body, but she was unexpectedly very good. Just now, it was windy outside, so he couldn't see clearly. Now, as soon as she got into the car, she put on the seat belt. That powerful appearance was still strapped out, which really surprised Jiang Hai. According to his point of view, the chances of this woman being a young woman were relatively high. Her age should be about the same as his, but he was used to being boring, so he really didn't know what to say. But fortunately, this woman gradually relaxed after discovering that Jiang Hai didn't seem to be a bad person and took out a box of cigarettes from her pocket. Can I smoke? Looking at Jiang Hai, the woman asked indifferently. Oh, yes. Because the weather is not very hot now, at least when the car is driving, there is no need to turn on the air conditioner. Opening the window, it is very cool, so Jiang Hai doesn't mind her smoking. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman picked up a cigarette and lit it up. Do you want it? After lighting it up, she asked Jiang Hai. I don't smoke. Waving his hand, Jiang Hai said to her. To be honest, Jiang Hai really doesn't smoke, but it's not like he doesn't know how to. Hearing that Jiang Hai doesn't smoke, the woman smiled and said, Good man. Don't worry, I know that cigarette butts can't be thrown out of the car. I will take care of it later. The United States has set up a system similar to the Sky Eye system in China all over the country. This can be seen by looking at the public enemy. But the difference is that the Sky Eye system in China is usually activated when there is a big case. Usually, the Sky Eye won't be activated when there is a traffic accident or something. But it is different in the United States. The Sky Eye in the United States is used for everything, but what it does most of the time is to see if something is thrown out of the car. Yes, Throwing something out of the car in the United States, no matter what it is, the punishment is very heavy. Take cigarette butts for example. Throwing cigarette butts out of the car on some important occasions can easily result in a fine of $4,000 or $5,000. This is talking about dollars. A while ago, there was news that someone was fined $8,000 for throwing a cigarette on a bridge in Oregon. It wasn't a joke. Obviously, although the woman can't speak English, she still knows this, which is why she said this to Jiang Hai. Oh, by the way, are you in the United States for a vacation or for work? Where are you from? From your accent, it seems like you are from the Northeast. Since the conversation has started, Jiang Hai also asked her. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman smiled bitterly and shook her head. Vacation? I wanted to travel too, but it's a pity that I was married here. But after I got married, my husband was a bastard. He smoked horses, drank too much, and beat people up. I came here for my identity in America, but now I can't go back. Luckily, I still have my little baby. Look, this is my daughter. As the woman spoke, she took off a necklace from her neck. There was a very old heart-shaped pendant on it. After opening it, there was a photo inside. There were two people in the photo. One was her, and the other was a mixed-blood little girl. The girl looks to be 3 or 4 years old. She is very clean and is definitely a mixed-race little beauty. In the photo, the two of them are smiling very happily and brightly. Looking at this smile, Jiang Hai can't help but smile. It is indeed very beautiful. Isn't it beautiful? My forgiveness is that I can always see my daughter's smile. Hee hee. By the way, I haven't told you where I'm from. I'm indeed from the Northeast, Dragon Province's Ice City. Touching the necklace beside her hand, the woman smiled and said. Chapter 750. Oh, then we are really from the same hometown. I am also from Bing City. Hearing this woman's words, Jiang Hai smiled and said. You are also from Bing City? Huh, what a coincidence. Which part of Bing City are you from? The woman laughed and asked when she heard Jiang Hai's words. I'm from Nangang. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also spoke. What a coincidence. I am also from Nangang. The woman's eyes lit up when she heard Jiang Hai's reply. What a coincidence. I'm from the healthcare side, but it's not far. Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai also gave a brief introduction. Oh, what a coincidence. Oh, how many years have you been in the US? The woman relaxed when she saw Jiang Hai was also from Bing City. Me? I have only been here for 2 years. What about you? You seem to have been here for a while. Jiang Hai asked curiously. Yes, I have been here for 4 years. When we first met, he wasn't like this. He was fair, clean, good-looking, and gentlemanly. We fell in love just like that. Later, after we graduated from university, I found out that I was pregnant. Just when I was at a loss, he said that he would bring me to America. At that time, I was stupid. I didn't know what to do, so I agreed easily. In the end, it turned out like this. The woman sighed and slowly told her story. Northeasterners were very straightforward. They would say whatever they wanted to say. When they were wary of others, they would also speak blindly. When they were not wary of others, well, they would be even more uncontrollable. This woman was obviously the same. According to her, her name is Xia Yuan. She was born in 1987, about the same age as Jiang Hai. She was 1 year older than Jiang Hai. Her grades were average. Her studies were average, but her looks were not bad. When she was in university, her family spent money to go to a good university. That was where she met her current husband. Her husband was not bad. They dated for 3 years in university. When they graduated in their 4th year, she found out that she was pregnant. After she told him, her husband brought her to the United States. There were indeed some people in the country who worshipped foreign things. They had always thought that living abroad was better than living at home. Her parents' family was the same. Although they would look down on their child, they were still very happy when they heard that their child was going to live in the United States. They happily sent Xiaofan to the United States. The first year was not bad. Although both of them were poor, they still had a chance to compete with each other. But in the second year, Xiaofan's husband's true nature was exposed. Big horses, women with special occupations, and so on all came out. In the 3rd year, he started drinking. After drinking, Xiaofan did not say anything. Jiang Hai could guess that he would hit and scold people. Xiaofan, who couldn't stand her husband, had already moved out. However, she couldn't ask for a divorce because she had only obtained the right to live here after marrying him. If she were to get a divorce now, she would be sent back to the country and her child would be sent to an orphanage. This was something that she could not allow. Therefore, even after she had moved away from her husband, she still insisted on it. She had to admit that Wuxia's woman had the genes of a man in her bones. She could also support this family. According to Xiaofan, she was working 2 jobs now. One job was to ensure that she and her daughter could eat and drink. The other job was to save some money for her daughter. After all, in the US, school was free. But when she was in university, it was not a small expense. So, it was necessary to save some money now. She could not be like the university students in the US. Before she went to school, she had to take out a loan. This was something that the parents in China would not understand. As for her English, it was a problem. Her current workplace was a Chinese restaurant and a Chinese supermarket. With her level of English, she could read English. But it was a little troublesome to speak it. According to her, she had wasted the past 4 years. As for why she appeared in Winthrop, there was a story. In the tour group, there were not only couples and couples, but there were also many single people. Men would always have some needs at night. In the US, such things were not hard to say. In some states, such working women were legal and had to pay taxes. Of course, there were also some high-class places, such as bars, where men could go to hunt women. But the problem was that Asians and Westerners had different aesthetic standards. In the eyes of Westerners, Asians looked a little plain. Their facial features were not three-dimensional at all. Because of this, when Asian men went to bars, if the women were not there for money, they would not look for them. But now, the Westerners in Winthrop did not lack money. If they could not find a target to have fun in bars, they would simply spend money. So, many people saw a business opportunity in this. They would find some working women from outside to do the same thing to these men. Xiaofan was also introduced to them by a fellow countryman. At first, she did not know that this was her job. After she came and found out, she wanted to go straight. This was a good thing in the US. They would not force you to do these things. If you wanted to go, you could go directly. It was fine, but you would have to pay for the fare back. She hailed a pickup truck in the small town. After agreeing on the price, she gave the money to the man. However, the man touched her on the road. After being hit by her, the man became angry. He didn't dare to hit her. The laws of the United States were very protective of women. So, he directly kicked her out of the car. Then, the scene that Jiang Hai saw just now happened. Oh, you are really unlucky. Listening to Xiaofan's story, Jiang Hai could not help but chuckle. I think so too. Helplessly shaking her head, Xiaofan took out a piece of tissue paper and directly wrapped the cigarette, but that had been smoked. Then, she pressed hard and the cigarette butt was extinguished. It was obvious that she had done this for more than a day or two. She was very skilled. Please turn right in front, thank you. As Xia Yuan put out the cigarette butt and then stuffed it into her trouser pocket, Jiang Hai also smiled. This mother is really free and easy. At this time, she also said to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also turned the steering wheel and turned into a path on the right. Jiang Hai was also very familiar with this place. This should still be considered the Boston area, but it is the junction of Winthrop, Chelsea, and Revere. It is commonly known as the unregulated area. Of course, this unregulated area is much better than some areas in New York because the Alabama mountains are not far from here. In the mountains, wild beasts come down all year round. Although there are almost no gray wolves in North America now, of course, this refers to the Northeast. There are still some in Yellowstone Park, but other animals, such as mountain lions, black bears, brown bears, and so on, will occasionally come down the mountain. In winter, the deer that come down the mountain are also very scary, so the police force in this place is still very sufficient. There is no money, and there are many police, so the security of this town is really good. However, there is no economic foundation, so no one is interested in this place. No one is interested in this place, which means that this place is very poor and has not been developed. When Jiang Hai drove in here, he found that the houses here are very old two-story buildings. Basically, the walls have almost peeled off. The people here are also very ordinary. Except for the elderly and children, there are almost no middle-aged and young people here. Jiang Hai saw a supermarket in the distance, Xishang Supermarket. He is quite familiar with this supermarket. After all, it is the old man Zhang Dihai's. It's here. While Jiang Hai was looking around, Xia Yuan also said to Jiang Hai. Following her words, Jiang Hai also looked at the community in front of him. This is a very ordinary residential community, but outside this community, there are many Chinese elderly and children standing. It seems that Xia Yuan's so-called Chinatown is here. Thank you very much for sending me back, but unfortunately, all my money was given to the bastard who drove the pickup truck, but I think you don't care about that little money when you drive such a car. If you don't mind, I will treat you to dinner. After parking the car, Xia Yuan also got out of the car and took out her luggage, but when she was about to enter the community, her footsteps stopped, then patted Jiang Hai's car door and said to him. Treat me to dinner? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some surprise. What? Are you looking down on my cooking skills? Let me tell you, don't underestimate the cooking skills of a single mother, not to mention that I have my best dishes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan also said with some dissatisfaction. Listening to her dissatisfied words, Jiang Hai smiled, then made an okay gesture, then parked the car in the distance, and then got out of the car. It's still early, let's go and get the ingredients for tonight's meal first. Seeing Jiang Hai get out of the car, Xia Yuan said with a smile. What do you want to eat? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai checked the environment here. Although the security of the place where the poor live is guaranteed, the environment, to be honest, the environment and air in most parts of the United States are better than in China. But here, it is estimated that it is worse than the average level in China. Jiang Hai felt here for a while. It is estimated that it is difficult to increase one piece if he stays here for a day, so it doesn't matter. He also doesn't want to stimulate this woman's self-esteem. This is also the reason why he agreed to eat. How about fish? Looking at Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan said with a smile. Not bad. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai nodded seriously. Eating fish is not bad, although he is basically tired of eating fish and beef. Then let's go fishing first. Hearing Jiang Hai agree, Xia Yuan also smiled, then walked away. After Jiang Hai heard her words, he was a little confused. Good heavens, treating others to a meal, do you have to catch the ingredients on the spot? With a wry smile, Jiang Hai shook his head and followed her. Today, he will listen to her arrangements. The two first went to a neighbor's house in this community. She went to borrow a fishing rod, then the two went to a small river that Jiang Hai saw when they came. When they arrived at the river, Jiang Hai glanced at it. This river is similar to other rivers in the United States, almost all of them are occupied by Asian carp. After Jiang Hai and Xia Yuan came to the river, Xia Yuan also took a look and expressed her satisfaction. I really don't understand. I really don't get it. The Americans are really wasting resources. Look at all these fish, and they are all wild fish. If this was in China, I would have made a fortune a long time ago. I wouldn't be in this situation now. TSK. Alright, let's set the rod. We'll decide what we're going to eat tonight based on what fish we catch. But we have to hurry. Patting Jiang Hai's arm, Xia Yuan said with a smile, then glanced at the time. Unknowingly, it was almost 3:00 in the afternoon. They have to hurry. You haven't ordered the menu yet? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai threw the fishing rod into the river and said with a little dumbfounded. Of course, this depends on what fish you catch. If it is a snakehead, I will make boiled fish for you. Don't underestimate me, I am very good at making fish. If you catch a carp, I will make braised fish for you. If you catch a silver carp, I will make steamed fish for you. Looking at Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. You also know how to make steamed fish for me? Looking at Xia Yuan, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. This steamed fish should be the best in the Northeast. No, to be exact, it should be the best in the Dragon Province. Jiang Hai had this kind of steamed fish when he was young. It was really delicious. But later, when he grew up, although some restaurants still had this kind of steamed fish, the taste was far worse. Jiang Hai didn't remember that his favorite food was the tofu in this steamed fish. After the tofu absorbed the soup of the fish, the taste was quite good, but he remembered that he didn't use grass roots to make this fish. Carp seemed to be okay too. Of course, although carp and black carp can also make this thing, it has to be big enough. It depends on your talent. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Xia Yuan knew that Jiang Hai wanted to eat steamed fish, but to make this, the fish had to be big enough. This, no problem. Jiang Hai heard her words and couldn't help but smile. Then, he looked at the river. If it was sea fishing, Jiang Hai might not be very good at it. But river fishing, this was his specialty. Putting all his attention on the river, Jiang Hai's eyes were also staring at the fish floating in front of him. He had to admit that fishing in the United States was really not a difficult thing, especially these river fish. Because the Americans didn't eat river fish, they didn't fish for river fish except for some enthusiasts. The fish here were very stupid. If there was bait in the water, it was almost certain to hit. Just like now. Chapter 751. As the fish floated into the water in an instant, Jiang Hai shook his wrist and instantly let the hook hang on the fish's mouth. Pa. As soon as the fish felt pain, the big fish also jumped out of the water and was quite active. Oh my God, what a big fish, be careful. Looking at the big fish that jumped out of the water, Xia Yuan shouted for the first time. Jiang Hai also glanced at the fish he caught. The fish he caught was about 60 centimeters long and seemed to be about 7 kilograms. There were many carps. Because of the size, some were wider and some were narrower, so it was not accurate. But Jiang Hai glanced at it and it was about this weight. After all, this fishing rod was not his. If it broke, it would be troublesome. Therefore, he still slipped for a while before bringing the fish to the edge of the water. When Xiaofan saw this, she didn't say anything and directly grabbed the fish. However, the fish's strength wasn't small, and it almost brought her into the water. However, Xiaofan was not to be trifled with after all. Her physical fitness had long been seen after working so many jobs. With a force, she threw the fish on the lawn next to her. Looking at the fish that was still jumping in the net, she was quite excited. "This fish is enough for us to eat." Looking at the fish, she couldn't help but say with a smile, "Get some small crucian carps, we can fry them and eat." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled. Then he replaced the hook with the smallest hook. Then he added some bait, that is, earthworms that he dug nearby, and threw them into the water. Maybe the fish here were really hungry. Soon after the earthworm went in, it took the bait. This time, Jiang Hai didn't have to slip the small fish. He directly pulled it up. At first glance, it was 2 palm-sized crucian carps. He even gave it a double shot, maybe it was because of the sound of the head. About half an hour later, Jiang Hai had caught a total of 13 crucian carps of different sizes. The big ones were the size of a palm, and the small ones were about half the size. Xiaofan was very happy to carry these fish. "Let's go and pick up my lady," she said to Jiang Hai. Seeing that the fish were almost ready, she did not intend to fish more. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and walked with her to a kindergarten near this community. At 4 o'clock, the kindergarten was over. A beautiful mixed-race girl in a small dress appeared in Jiang Hai's sight. "Treasure." Seeing this girl, Xiaofan immediately ran over and picked her up. However, when the girl looked at Jiang Hai, she was somewhat timid. Her big eyes were filled with curiosity and doubt. Who was this uncle standing beside her mother? "Come, let me introduce you. This is my little baby, Xiaofan. Her English name is Joyce. Treasure, this is Uncle Jiang Hai. You can call him Uncle Jiang. Today, Uncle Jiang is eating with us at our house." Hearing Xiaofan's introduction, this pink little girl also timidly called Jiang Hai Uncle Jiang. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then the 3 of them carried the fish they caught and returned to Xiaofan's home. Xiaofan's family rented a house in this community. They rented a 2-bedroom, 1 living room, about 50 square meters. After Jiang Hai entered, he looked around. Although this was a very old house, although this was a very dilapidated house, almost nothing was new. Even the TV was the kind with a big head. He didn't know how long the air conditioner had been used. The whole air conditioner was particularly yellow. The lights were also dim because of the electricity bill. To be honest, if it wasn't for Jiang Hai's strong sense of presence, he would have thought that he was in the 90s. However, although this small house looked a bit dilapidated, Xiaofan should be a very hard-working person because her room was very clean. "Take a look around and have a seat. I'll go get something to eat." When Jiang Hai was looking around the room, Xiaofan also came over. After saying something to Jiang Hai, she went to the kitchen to get busy. Jiang Hai glanced at the kitchen. It was really too small. This also stopped him from going in to help. Looking at the 2 rooms, the bigger one should be Xiaofan's room. The smaller one should be Xiaoxiao's room. Some people would say, how old is Xiaoxiao? She wants to sleep in her own room? In fact, this was very common in the United States. The education system in the United States was completely different from that in China. Because children in the United States were trained to be independent from a young age, little Xiaoxiao also had a separate room. After looking around, Jiang Hai sat on the sofa. Xiaoxiao didn't make a fuss. Instead, she sat not far from Jiang Hai and watched the cartoon on the television. Looking at the well-behaved girl in front of him, Jiang Hai's mind couldn't help but drift far away. You can't expect him to sit here and not be in a daze. Instead, he accompanied the little girl to watch a 4-year-old cartoon. That would be too deceptive. Here, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Wuxia's education policy was different from that of the United States. In Wuxia, although it was said to be a socialist system, children had to be the best in school. In the eyes of parents, children had to be compared from a young age. They had to be compared with their classmates in learning, doing things, and everything. Other people's children. This should be the most troublesome sentence for Jiang Hai's generation. At the same time that parents oppressed their children, parents in China were also oppressing themselves. Since young, when they were in kindergarten, parents had been giving money to their children. In order to let the teachers take care of the children in school, to let the teachers be the first to put on clothes for the children when they left the house, and to let the teachers teach the children more clearly, almost everyone in Jiang Hai's memory had given the teachers gifts when he was young. Jiang Hai's parents had also given the teachers gifts. He had heard about it before. When they were in junior high school, there was a student who had some mental problems. He couldn't speak clearly and always scored 20 or 30 points in his exams. But at that time, because his father gave the teacher a laptop, he became the class monitor, the head teacher, and the teacher's class representative. Who could you find to reason with? But to be honest, these things didn't exist in the United States. Of course, it wasn't absolute. There might be some black sheep that Jiang Hai knew about. But with Jiang Hai's understanding of the primary schools and schools around Winthrop, this was impossible. In the United States, if a child wanted to become a class committee member at a young age, giving gifts would not work. In the United States, where individual heroism was revered, Americans were educated to have a sense of community. In the United States, before they went to primary school, they would go to the preschool class. If a child wanted to be a class committee member in the preschool class, he or she would first have to serve his or her classmates and be praised by them. In that kind of environment, there were 3 people in each class. One was the person who opened the door, one was the leader, and one was the person who turned off the lights. Everyone wanted to be the leader, but this required the children to line up. They could only do it when it was their turn. If it wasn't their turn, they couldn't do it. After they went to primary school, the school's policy was to let them do whatever they wanted. There wasn't much applied education, and there wasn't much to learn. Unless you formed your own club, it was almost impossible to become an official in the class by giving gifts to the teacher. This was very difficult to convince the masses. But in the United States, wasn't it up to the teacher to convince the masses? But overseas, the teacher's words didn't hold much weight. Jiang Hai couldn't say which was good and which was bad. In his opinion, the education in the United States was not bad because he didn't lack money. He could spend money and see who could spend more than him. The education in the United States was not bad, and he could save some money. It's time to eat. Just as Jiang Hai was floating there, Xia Yuan's voice came. Hearing Xia Yuan's voice, Jiang Hai came back from his thoughts. He smiled at her and went to the kitchen to wash his hands. At the same time, he saw that a big bowl of fish soup was ready. Next to the fish soup, there was a plate of small fish. It was fried Crucian carp. After Jiang Hai washed his hands, he brought these 2 things out. Xia Yuan, who was about to go in and help, saw that Jiang Hai had already brought them out, so she didn't say anything. She hurriedly tidied up the table, then went to the fridge to take out some beer and put it on the table. Come, let's eat. Seeing that the 2 plates of fish were ready, she also said to Jiang Hai. Then, she hugged her daughter and sat at the table. After saying something to Jiang Hai, she didn't say anything else. She first picked up a piece of fish and put it in her bowl, but she didn't rush to eat. Instead, she picked out the bones on it and put it in her daughter's bowl. Looking at Xia Yuan's appearance, Jiang Hai suddenly had a feeling of wanting to have a child. He had many women, but in these 2 years, there had been no news. What's wrong? Eat? Seeing that Jiang Hai was still in a daze, Xia Yuan also looked at him and said to him. Oh, he. Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then, he picked up a piece of fish with his chopsticks and put it in his bowl. Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This taste, it was unexpectedly delicious. Moreover, the taste was similar to the stewed fish that he had eaten when he was a child. One must know that this was very rare. First, it was because when he was a child, China's economy was not too developed. This was something that everyone knew. Therefore, when he ate it, he would feel that it was very delicious. Now, it was not an exaggeration to say that Jiang Hai was living in the middle of delicious food. Chia put all her talents into eating. She cooked Chinese and Western dishes. Although her cooking couldn't be compared to the top chefs, it was not a problem to get the title of a chef. In addition, with the ingredients raised by Jiang Hai, it would be strange if the food she cooked was not delicious. But unexpectedly, the taste of this fish was not worse than Chia's cooking, which really surprised Jiang Hai. Delicious, right? I knew that the people in Bing City would like to eat this. This is my secret recipe. My father used to be a chef, and he taught me this. Looking at Jiang Hai's expression, Xia Yuan knew that Jiang Hai was eating happily. So, she smiled and said. At the same time, she opened 2 bottles of beer. One for her, and the other for Jiang Hai. After eating a mouthful of fish and drinking a mouthful of beer, Jiang Hai nodded with satisfaction. How do you cook this fish? After eating a piece of tofu in the fish soup, Jiang Hai said with satisfaction. The main thing is to get all the ingredients. Wild fish is the best, followed by tofu, vermicelli, cabbage, streaky pork, mushrooms, potatoes, green chili, dried red chili, spring onions, ginger, garlic, salt, cooking wine, sugar, soy sauce, pepper, star anise, cinnamon, and most importantly, Schisandra chinensis and perilla. Hearing Jiang Hai was very interested in this dish, Xia Yuan explained slowly. When you cook the fish, you have to fry it in oil for 3 to 4 minutes, and then mix the broth. This is the most important thing. If you cook it at home, you have to mix the broth several times to know how much to put in. Then, you have to fry the streaky pork and use the oil from the streaky pork as the base. Then, you put the fried fish in the broth and pour in the broth. Once the broth is done, you have to boil the fish for 5 minutes and then reduce the heat to simmer for 20 minutes. After simmering for 20 minutes, you have to add the vermicelli, potatoes, and hazelnut mushrooms. 10 minutes later, you have to add the tofu and white tea. After simmering for another 5 minutes, you have to turn off the heat, and the dish is done. Xia Yuan said to Jiang Hai while picking up the fish. Hearing the recipe of this dish, Jiang Hai's head started to hurt. It seems that the preparation of this dish was indeed a troublesome matter. If he was asked to do it, he could do it a few times, but if he did it too many times, he wouldn't be willing to do it. But being unwilling to do it didn't mean that he didn't want to eat it. Just like now, he was still very willing to eat it. Jiang Hai was quite happy to eat the fish and vermicelli. Seeing that Jiang Hai was eating happily, Xia Shuiao also ate with big mouthfuls. She had to admit that it was better to eat when there were more people. If there were too few people, it wouldn't be interesting to eat. After a simple meal, Jiang Hai and Xia Yuan also started to drink. Although the two of them didn't know each other before today, they were still from the same place. They were very familiar with each other when they talked about the things that happened there. Moreover, as they talked, they found out that they were in the same school when they were in junior high school. After all, in that era, the number of people who would spend money to choose a school was limited. Most people went to the nearest school, and there was only one junior high school near Jianghai. Naturally, they went to this junior high school. This time, with the relationship of schoolmates, the two drank happily. As they drank, Jianghai didn't notice that the sky was completely dark, and they were still moving forward slowly. About 8 o'clock, Xiaofan went back to her room to sleep. As for Jianghai and Xiaofan, they were still drinking. When Jianghai found that Xiaofan had drunk a little too much, he glanced at his watch. It was already 10 o'clock. They had already drunk all the beer in the refrigerator. Jianghai glanced at the beer bottles on the ground. He had drunk more than 20 bottles, while Xiaofan had drunk 15 or 16 bottles. Chapter 752. Puff. Jianghai spat out a mouthful of spring water into his mouth. He then wiped his face and the oil on his face with the water. He frowned and looked at the mountains in the distance. He stood up and picked up a mirror to look at his lower back. There was still a distance before the scales were full. Phew, this should be enough. Jianghai muttered as he looked around. Jianghai nodded as he looked at the natural environment around him. This was the third day since he came out. On the first day, he spent a night at Xiaofan's place. On the second day, he entered the mountains. After spending a day and a night, he arrived at the mountains that were completely devoid of human habitation. This was really a deep mountain. It was very deep. Along the way, Jianghai drove at about 10 to 20 miles per hour. There were very few places where he could drive at 40 miles per hour. After driving for about 30 hours, he arrived at this place. This was a very beautiful natural landscape. At this time, according to the GPS, he was about 300 kilometers away from the nearest road. Don't underestimate 300 kilometers. 300 kilometers was really far. In China, 300 kilometers was equivalent to crossing provinces. From the capital of Heilong Province, Bing City, to the provincial capital of Ji Province, Chun City, was only 270 kilometers. This was not even a straight line. Jianghai was now 300 kilometers away. There was absolutely no human habitation in the mountains at all. Jianghai was quite at ease to evolve here. He stood up and walked around. After confirming that there were no traces of human habitation, he gave up on the idea of Native Americans living here. After thinking for a while, he decided to prepare to evolve here. But before that, he still had a lot of things to do. First, he had to find an open space. Luckily, this was not very difficult. After Jianghai stood up from the stream, he looked around and found an open space not far away. There were very few trees around it. Since there was an open space there, Jianghai did not have to look for it again. After all, he could evolve at any time now. After confirming the location, he got in the car and drove over. Then, he got out of the car and took his multifunctional military shovel to clean up the surrounding weeds. This was to prevent the insects from easily getting into the car. Then, he sprinkled some insect repellent and the like to drive the insects away. Then, he dug some holes near the tires to deal with floods and the like. With the tires under the holes, they would be able to hold out for a while. Then, he took the prepared iron rope and firmly nailed the car to the ground. Then, he went to find some large pieces of gravel nearby and fixed the tires of the car. After working for more than 2 hours, Jianghai finally found the place to evolve. Then, he ate something with high calories, such as chocolate, drank enough water, and went to the toilet. The sky had unknowingly darkened. The environment here was not like Jianghai's manner. Because the land was full of spiritual energy, the spiritual energy would replenish Jianghai. But in this forest, although there were many species, the growth of the scales was not very fast. After everything was done, Jianghai also went to the back seat of the car. On the front glass, he hung a "Please don't disturb me" sign. This was also to ensure that if someone passed by, they wouldn't disturb him. Then he locked the door, but left some small gaps in the windows. He was afraid that he would suffocate to death. Then, he laid down the back seat, adjusted his breathing, and lay down. Wait quietly. Putting his body in the calmest state, Jiang Hai whispered to himself. Then, he slowly slowed down his breathing, waiting for the moment of evolution to come. When the last ray of sunlight was blocked by the forest and disappeared in this forest, Jiang Hai's mind suddenly buzzed, and his consciousness entered his body. But this time, Jiang Hai was not worried, because he knew that this meant that he was about to evolve. When Jiang Hai's consciousness recovered, he found himself in that world again, but unlike the previous times where the clouds were dense and the wind and thunder were howling, this time the whole world was extremely quiet. The sky was so blue, the clouds were so white, and the sea was very calm. Jiang Hai lowered his head and looked at the reflection in the water. At this time, he was no longer himself, but a golden dragon. Jiang Hai didn't know what he would become after this evolution, but judging by the visual, it shouldn't be as terrifying as when he transformed from a flood dragon. It seemed to feel the invasion of Jiang Hai's consciousness. Although Jiang Hai's consciousness couldn't control this dragon gently slid its body and plunged into the deep sea. Because Jiang Hai himself also had a water-repellent attribute, he didn't care too much about this action. After plunging into the deep sea, Jiang Hai found that a very monotonous water world appeared in front of him at this time. Yes, monotonous, he couldn't think of anything else besides this word, because at this time, in his eyes, this sea was completely lifeless. There were no fish, not even any creatures, no insects, no seaweed, and no corals. This sea was the purest water. Except for water, there was only water. If there was something unrelated to water, it would be the stones and some sand at the bottom of the sea. Except for these things, there was nothing in this sea, which made Jiang Hai a little confused. What does this mean? He couldn't figure it out at all. Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, he saw the golden dragon slowly swimming into the deep sea, grabbing a piece of soil, and then blowing. Jiang Hai could feel a mouthful of rich spiritual energy erupting from the dragon's mouth, then entering the soil. Then, the soil seemed to come alive. In front of Jiang Hai, it slowly turned into a dragon, a creature similar to the golden dragon, but much smaller than the golden yellow dragon. After this creature appeared, it first let out a slightly childish dragon cry, then it lay in front of Jiang Hai in the water. This was a sign of submission. The dragon that Jiang Hai transformed into at this time was very satisfied with the dragon's submission. Then, it grabbed another piece of soil and blew a mouthful of spiritual energy. Then, another dragon appeared in front of him. In Jiang Hai's consciousness, this dragon kept grabbing soil and then spitting out spiritual energy. Then, it grabbed soil and spat out spiritual energy again. One by one, small dragons appeared around him. Perhaps the dragons made of soil were a little monotonous. After the dragon made 81 small dragons, it grabbed a stone and spat out a mouthful of spiritual energy. However, stones were not as malleable as soil. These stones that were nourished by spiritual energy turned into a relatively fat dragon. This dragon was much rounder than the dragon made of soil, and it only had one horn on its head. But Jiang Hai felt that this dragon was stronger than the dragon made of soil. Its defense was stronger, and its physical fitness was stronger. Horned dragon. In the dark, a voice gave a new definition to this new species. Horned dragon. Hearing this voice that seemed to come from beyond the sky and the nickname given to this new species, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. Ever since he obtained the dragon orb, he had also checked a lot about the level of dragons. It was said that a snake cultivated for 100 years to become a flood dragon, a flood dragon cultivated for 1,000 years to become a dragon cultivated for another 500 years to become a horned dragon, and another 10 million years to become a winged dragon. He remembered that the horned dragon was clearly the evolution of a dragon, so why did it become a creature of the same level? Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, this golden dragon had finished blowing all the nearby stones and turned into 49 horned dragons. At this time, its dragon claws grabbed the sand beside it. As it spat out spiritual energy from its mouth, the sand instantly turned into a creature similar to a dragon. However, this creature had a pair of wings on its back, just like sand in the water. When the wings closed, this dragon instantly flew out of the sea and appeared on the surface of the sea. Its flapping wings, coupled with the dragon's roar, showed its existence to the world. Winged dragon. Winged dragon. Sure enough, the moment this creature appeared, a voice in the dark and in Jiang Hai's mind appeared at the same time. That was the name of this new species. As he watched the golden dragon in front of him create 3 types of small dragons, Jiang Hai's heart was surging. At the same time, he also found out for the first time that dragons, horned dragons, and winged dragons weren't of the same level. Following the birth of this first winged dragon, the golden dragon grabbed the sand again and began to spit out spiritual energy. After spitting out 8 more dragons in a row, 9 winged dragons were flying in the sky above. There were 81 dragons in the sea, and the 49 horned dragons were also tossing and turning. My race, dragon. In this peaceful atmosphere, the golden dragon also spoke at this time. What surprised Jiang Hai was that this voice was almost exactly the same as his own. As soon as the golden dragon finished speaking, a golden light descended from the sky and completely enveloped Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai vaguely knew the origin of this golden light. It was merit, the merit of establishing a race. Feeling the powerful mental power that didn't belong to the human world, Jiang Hai also closed his eyes and began to carefully comprehend the supreme concept contained in the power of merit. However, perhaps because Jiang Hai had never cultivated before, he didn't have the heart of self-improvement or the thoughts of a saint. He couldn't feel anything other than the huge power contained in the golden light. It was as if he was just a bystander at this time. Well, he was indeed just a bystander. He closed his eyes to feel this different world. However, Jiang Hai didn't realize that unknowingly, the dragon horn on the golden dragon's head grew thicker and thicker. There was also an additional branch, and a new horn was slowly rising from the horn. This was the golden dragon's evolution. However, Jiang Hai didn't know what benefits it would bring to Jiang Hai after the evolution. At this time, Jiang Hai, who was evolving in his mind, didn't know that 3 days had passed since the golden dragon finished molding the little dragon. By the time the golden light covered his head, another day had already passed. On the 5th day, he had only just grown a new horn. At this time, if there were cultivators in this forest, well, there were no cultivators in this world. The spirit qi in this forest was crazily surging into Jiang Hai's car and into Jiang Hai's body. At this time, animals with sensitive spiritual senses also appeared beside Jiang Hai's car. There were snakes, bears, deer, foxes, mountain lions, rabbits, squirrels, and so on. There were even wolves that people thought were extinct. However, these creatures all had one thing in common. That was, these creatures were much bigger than ordinary creatures of the same species. Moreover, they didn't look young. Humans became demons after 100 years. There were also some intelligent creatures in the animal kingdom. Their powerful spiritual sense made them smarter, bigger, and stronger, breaking the limits of their genes. At this time, they also sensed Jiang Hai's existence. However, at this time, Jiang Hai was not a human that these creatures were afraid of. In their opinion, Jiang Hai was like Tang Seng's meat. However, they didn't have much of a way to deal with the iron lump in front of them. At the same time, the waves of pressure coming from Jiang Hai's body made them a little afraid. Therefore, at this time, they just stood there without moving. They weren't in a hurry to find trouble with Jiang Hai. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know about this. He was just immersed in his own world, feeling the huge power of merit constantly washing over his body, making his dragon body stronger and stronger. The horns on his head also grew longer and longer. Finally, when the last trace of golden light disappeared into the sky, a majestic voice came from the underworld. All things are a race. Enlighten the world. As the heavy voice sounded, Jiang Hai suddenly woke up from his hazy thoughts. When he opened his dragon eyes, he also opened his eyes in reality. However, he knew that this time, the evolution was complete. However, the moment Jiang Hai opened his eyes in reality, the creatures that had been waiting for a long time also rushed over loudly. Although there was no trace of spirit energy leaking from Jiang Hai's body now, they knew very well how rich the spirit energy on Jiang Hai's body was just now. This thing had an inexplicable innate attraction to animals. They had to get it. When Jiang Hai returned to his original body, the pressure of the golden dragon disappeared. These creatures naturally chose to attack at this point. Before Jiang Hai could react, the animals on the other side had already rushed over. Without saying a word, the huge brown bear slammed its paw on the roof of the car. And then there was nothing else. This was a shield. If a bear's paw can break it, then what kind of shield is it? So the bear's paw bounced off. Jiang Hai was stunned. He didn't say anything. Chapter 753. But when it slapped, Jiang Hai in the car was shocked. He immediately looked back and found that the animals were attacking him crazily. The brown bear's paw slapped down again. The mountain lion jumped on the roof of Jiang Hai's car and kept scratching the car. The snake also coiled in front of Jiang Hai's car window and hit Jiang Hai's glass with its head. Looking at these crazy animals in front of him, Jiang Hai was really shocked. However, just as his fear spread, his pupil subconsciously shrank. At this time, he couldn't see it himself, but if someone else was there, they would definitely be able to see it. Jiang Hai's pupils shrank at the moment of his fear, changing from human eyes in an instant. If Jiang Hai could see it, he would recognize it. These were the eyes of the giant dragon. In the pale yellow pupil, there was a vertical pupil. It was really scary on a human face. But at the moment when the pupil changed, a powerful force gushed out in an instant. The power that was almost visible to the naked eye instantly spread around with him as the center. The bears, leopards, snakes, and the like that were still knocking on Jiang Hai's car window were also scared in an instant under this power. Then, without saying a word, they turned around and ran away. Damn, what's going on? Just now, Jiang Hai also felt that he seemed to be a little different, but he soon recovered. He just felt a little dizzy. He pulled the back of the front seat and sat up. Jiang Hai knocked on his head and looked at the animals that quickly disappeared into the mountains. He couldn't help but feel a little confused. He rubbed his face. He was trying to determine whether the scene just now was reality or his own imagination. Is the new ability Haoshiku Haki? It can also scare away small animals. Looking at the animals that escaped in front of him, Jiang Hai took a few seconds to determine that he was not imagining it, but it was real. Then he couldn't help but laugh at himself. Is this possible? Shaking his head, he closed his eyes and felt the benefits of this upgrade. Although it didn't evolve from a golden dragon to some other species, the evolution after the upgrade was still quite impressive. The aura of Jiang Hai's scales increased again. In the beginning, 1 drop of Jiang Hai's blood was equivalent to 3 scales. Later on, 1 scale was equivalent to 3 scales. Now, after the evolution, it had changed to a ternary scale. One scale was equivalent to 3 scales. In other words, it was equivalent to 3 drops of blood. But this time, Jiang Hai evolved again. It was still ternary, and one scale was equivalent to 9 drops of blood. But this time, the scales were even finer. Jiang Hai could feel that this upgrade would be very troublesome. This was because there were a total of 3,780 scales. If he didn't have any treasures to increase the number of scales, then he would need to increase the number of scales quickly. Even if he returns to the manor and maintains the current upgrade speed of about 20 scales a day, Jiang Hai will need 189 days to upgrade, that is, half a year. Most importantly, Jiang Hai can't guarantee 20 scales a day, he still has to go out. Unless he is tied to the bed all day long and doesn't move at all, otherwise, according to Jiang Hai's estimation, it will take another year to upgrade to the next level. At least around June next year, he will be able to upgrade to the next level. Temporarily suppressing the idea of upgrading, Jiang Hai continued to check his new abilities. After this evolution, not only did the scale's spiritual energy increase, but Jiang Hai's other abilities also increased. His physical fitness doubled again. The doubled here was not the doubled of an ordinary person, but the doubled of his original body. In the past, when Jiang Hai obtained the inheritance of the python, his physical fitness was the limit of a human. After becoming a flood dragon, it was twice the limit of a human. After transforming into a dragon, it was 4 times the limit of a human. Now that he has another horn, Jiang Hai's strength has reached 8 times the limit of a human. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai clenched his fist and punched a few times quickly. He found that with his eyesight, there were some afterimages of him punching. It can be seen that Jiang Hai's speed has improved again. It is said that Tyson can punch 6 times a second, and it is said that Bronze Saint can punch 80 times a second at the speed of sound. Jiang Hai certainly can't reach the speed of sound now, but it is not a problem to punch a dozen times a second. Now I have the level of a trainee saint, Haoshiku Haki and trainee saint, is this still the world I am familiar with? Of course, Jiang Hai is now talking nonsense and laughing at himself. After feeling his body and confirming that he has become stronger again, Jiang Hai also took a deep breath and then looked at the skill similar to Haoshiku Haki just now. Then he found that this skill is somewhat similar to Dragon Might, which is also his new skill. After releasing it, it will consume a lot of spiritual power, but it has a lot of effect on animals. The smarter the animal, the stronger the effect. But it has no effect on humans because humans are too smart. With this skill, Jiang Hai will be much safer if he goes into the sea again. The only thing he needs to worry about is other people. After moving his body, Jiang Hai took out the mobile phone and gun next to him, then opened the door and got out. After confirming that there were no other people nearby, Jiang Hai glanced at the mobile phone. Well, the mobile phone that he specially equipped with a power bank is also out of battery. It seems that he has been unconscious for at least a week. After getting into the driver's seat, starting the engine, and then connecting to the mobile phone lit up again, and then the current time was displayed on it. Looking at the time, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. It's been half a month. Yes, with this time, Jiang Hai's evolution, the time directly jumped from June to July. As the mobile phone was turned on, countless text messages and the like jumped in. You don't think that there is also a network signal in the mountains of the United States, so Jiang Hai's network can't be used, and he can only receive text messages. Jiang Hai picked up the mobile phone and looked at it. There were a total of 73 text messages. After all, he disappeared for half a month. More than 20 of them were sent by Edouard Anderson, Robbins Garcia, and Dulles Gerard, telling Jiang Hai about the recent sales situation. Jiang Hai glanced at it and there was basically no discrepancy. The money they received from the checks matched the money that Jiang Hai's bank account. There were also more than 30 messages sent by Delina, Marian, Aphrodite, Chia, Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaosi, and so on. Basically, they were asking about Jiang Hai's situation. There were also messages sent by Qi Li and Prawalton. They also knew that Jiang Hai had temporarily left, so they also sent messages to check the situation for a few days, but after finding that Jiang Hai didn't reply, they stopped sending messages. There were also some messages sent by Moses Adams, mainly talking about the merger of those companies. Looking at the messages he sent, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Seeing that there was nothing particularly urgent, Jiang Hai threw the mobile phone into the car first. Then, after returning to the car and eating a good meal, he began to untie the ropes that fixed the car. He had to admit that the dust in the forest was actually not too much. Half a month had passed, but Jiang Hai's car was not particularly dirty. After untying the safety rope tied to the car, Jiang Hai also got back into the car and started the engine. The oil in the United States was really good. After not starting for half a month, the car started directly as soon as he turned the key. After warming up a little, Jiang Hai drove the car and was ready to go back. But when he went back, he naturally had to report that he was safe. First, he called Qi Jia. After all, in name, she was now in charge of Jiang Hai's family. After hearing that Jiang Hai had finished his business and was ready to come back, not only Qi Jia, but everyone else breathed a sigh of relief. Then they heard that Jiang Hai was already going back, which made the women who hadn't seen Jiang Hai for a long time couldn't help but cheer. Daliana and Marian directly called Aphrodite and told them the good news. After chatting with them for a while, Jiang Hai also hung up the phone. After all, according to the drive, he should be going back tomorrow. He could talk about it at that time. Then he also called Prawalton and Qi Li. Hearing that Jiang Hai was fine, the two were relieved. Moreover, Qi Li also told Jiang Hai that the girl named Du Ning was really a good helper. Not only could she protect her, but she was also very smart and could help her deal with a lot of things. Jiang Hai was also very happy. After talking with them for a while, Jiang Hai called Moses Adams. Adams also reported on the situation of the past few days. He had to admit that there were specializations in this field, and he was still very strong in this aspect. Counting the time before Jiang Hai left, he had been attacking these companies for almost 20 days. The first company to collapse was the Cartwright Company. Although the Cartwright Company later rescued the market, they really didn't have much money. Moreover, their shareholders weren't particularly interested in the company. About 100 million yuan was invested in the company, but they still collapsed. Taking advantage of the collapse, Moses Adams bought more than 80% of the company's shares at the price of 17 million. Then he directly sold the shares to a company he had already negotiated with in exchange for $300 million. Including the attack and acquisition, Moses Adams had spent a total of about 130 million, but he had sold it for 300 million. In 20 days, Jiang Hai had earned 170 million. Of course, this was also subject to tax, but it was not that heavy. This was because the 300 million was obtained through the purchase and sale of shares. Of course, the tax on the stock market couldn't be as heavy as income tax. Otherwise, if the national tax was included, it would be 35%. If you buy 100 million worth of shares, you have to pay $35 million. In other words, if you buy 100 million worth of shares, you have to pay $135 million, and then you have to pay $35 million when you sell it. Isn't that cheating? Therefore, the tax on shares was different from ordinary taxes. But when added together, it didn't exceed 20 million. That was to say, Jiang Hai earned $150 million in 20 days. Of course, this was also accidental. It was really because there were people who wanted the Cartwright Company, and the directors who happened to meet them didn't have much confidence in the company. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy to make money. Just like the venture capital company on the other side, Mariong Smith was still very capable. He had a net worth of around 100 million, but who knew where he got another $300 million from? At the moment, he was still in a tug-of-war with Moses Adams in the financial market. But Moses Adams was in the dark, while he was in the light. It wasn't a problem for him to play with him. Moreover, with the 150 million as a base, Moses Adams felt more at ease playing with him, because Jiang Hai's overall request wasn't to make money, but to not have to pay. Moses Adams reported that when he was dealing with Mariong Smith, he had lost almost $20 million, but Mariong Smith had lost more than $80 million. It was just a matter of who couldn't take it first. As for the last Akita Corporation, Moses Adams couldn't help even if he wanted to. After all, it was a Japanese company, and it was a family-run company. They were not listed in the United States, so it was very troublesome. In this case, Jiang Hai can only deal with these two troublemakers first. After that, he will consider whether to inject funds into Sakura country to fight against this family. However, this risk is quite big, so Jiang Hai needs to think about it carefully. Listening to Moses Adams' report, Jiang Hai also nodded secretly. This matter was quite reliable. Continue to give him authorization. He didn't expect to earn anything, just not too much loss. After Moses Adams had Jiang Hai's affirmation, he was more relieved. After confirming these things, Jiang Hai also let out a sigh of relief. The matter was temporarily settled. The rest would wait until he returned to the manor. But just as Jiang Hai finished all the phone calls and was ready to drive with peace of mind, suddenly, more than a dozen figures ran out of the forest. When they saw Jiang Hai's car, they went straight to the front of Jiang Hai's car without saying a word and surrounded Jiang Hai's car. Jiang Hai saw these people's actions and couldn't help but be stunned. After stopping the car, he also looked at the people around the car. The people around the car should be Native Americans, because their skin color was Native American. At this time, these people's faces were painted with colorful oil paint. Their upper bodies were red, and their lower bodies were also wearing their ethnic costumes, but there were still realistic clothes inside. At this time, they surrounded Jiang Hai's car, holding their own homemade firearms in their hands, and looked at Jiang Hai with vigilance. "Hi, friends in front, what's the matter? I know you're people from Kanan's unit." Looking at these people surrounding him, Jiang Hai didn't mean to cause any conflict. After putting out the fire, he spoke to these people in front of him in Native American language. Chapter 754. This sentence was taught to him by the man in the Native American store in Winthrop. Although Jiang Hai doesn't know if it's right, he can only try his best at this time. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them seriously, "Kanans? Kanans, do you know the Iroquois from the Kanans tribe?" After hearing Jiang Hai's words, these Native Americans looked at each other, then they walked away, and a young girl walked out of the crowd. This girl has skin similar to that of an Asian, of course, much darker. Her long black hair is draped behind her head, and she looks quite good-looking. She looks to be only 14 or 15 years old, with some baby fat. A rattan is tied to her head, and there is a straight feather on it. She is wearing an animal skin top, the kind that is very short, exposing her navel and covering her upper body. She was wearing a skirt made of animal skin and a pair of hiking shoes that were imported from the outside world. Yes, I am from Winthrop. My name is Jiang Hai. Our town has a good relationship with the Iroquois. They have a Native American store there that we cooperate with." Looking at the girl in front of him who asked him in English, Jiang Hai immediately explained. "Oh. So, you are not in the same group as those outsiders?" Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, the girl asked doubtfully. What outsiders?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some confusion. Outsiders? He doesn't know. It seems that he really doesn't know about the outsiders. Hearing Jiang Hai's words and looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, the girl was sure that Jiang Hai should really not know about the outsiders. In fact, she just said that to scare Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai immediately denied or hesitated, it proved that there was something wrong with Jiang Hai. But now, Jiang Hai's reaction proved that he might really not know. So she said to a strong man beside her, using her native language. Jiang Hai did not understand these words, but he knew that she should be asking this strong man. At the same time, Jiang Hai was also looking at the strong man. It seemed that he was the leader of these people. He was about 190 centimeters tall, which was not common among the Native Americans. He was very strong, and his upper body was red, full of scars and strong muscles. At first glance, it was obvious that he was not someone to be trifled with. While Jiang Hai was looking at him, he was also looking at Jiang Hai. We have no intention to have a conflict with outsiders, but we are in the middle of our ceremony. If you are really not one of those outsiders who came to cause trouble, then we will send someone to contact the Iroquois and let them prove your identity. Then you can leave. The Native Americans were almost wiped out by the Americans, so it was impossible to say that they did not hate the Americans. But in reality, how should one put it? They were beaten into submission, because if the Americans really wanted to, they could really wipe out all the Native Americans. But the Americans wanted to show their humanitarianism. They began to protect the Native Americans, protect their habitat, although there was not much left, and protect their civilization and culture. It was because of this show that the forest where the Native Americans were hiding was protected. The Native Americans were really scared. They were really afraid that the Americans would wipe them out. So now, except for a few tribes who still hated the Americans, most of the troops maintained the principle of "don't provoke me, and I won't provoke you." The tribe that Jiang Hai encountered at this time was such a neutral tribe. If Jiang Hai did not know the Iroquois, these people might have captured Jiang Hai and then notified the American government to come and take him. But since Jiang Hai knew the Iroquois, he could just let the Iroquois come and take a look. This was the principle of having acquaintances, and it was easy to get things done wherever you went. After the girl translated the man's words, Jiang Hai nodded to show that he understood. Then should I wait here, or what? Jiang Hai didn't intend to be enemies with these people. Plus, he didn't have anything urgent to do, so he opened the door and jumped out first. After indicating that he wasn't a threat, he asked the girl, "You can drive your steel monster to our tribe and wait for the Iroquois there." After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl translated to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man thought for a while and then said to Jiang Hai. After hearing the girl's translation, Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. He then got back into the car and started the engine. Although these Native Americans lived in the Alabama mountains, they were in the eastern part of the United States. It was not an exaggeration to say that every inch of land was worth an inch of gold. Although they did not have a good relationship with the American government, they could not only rely on the forest to be self-sufficient. They also needed to exchange medicine and daily necessities regularly, just like the Iroquois in the beginning. They would send some people to bring their things to places they believed in. Therefore, they had seen cars before and would not be surprised by Jiang Hai's car. However, they were still quite interested in Jiang Hai's car. Jiang Hai slowly followed these people and drove into the forest. After driving for about half an hour, Jiang Hai saw a village made of wood and stone near an exposed mountain corner in the distance. At this time, there were about 300 people gathered in the middle of the village. For a Native American tribe, 300 people was a big tribe. As Jiang Hai's car drove over, many people came out of the tribe. There were men and women, old and young. The children looked at Jiang Hai's car with great interest. Jiang Hai was also looking at the tribe at this time. This tribe was slightly better than the African tribes he had seen on TV before, but it was only slightly better. After all, they were still living in their own culture. There were not many modern influences, but there were not many of them either. For example, the clothes here, except for the national costumes, were all from modern times. Bed sheets, quilts, paper, pens, toilet paper, and so on were all from civilized society. But unlike civilized society, there was no electricity here. Naturally, there were no electric fans, televisions, washing machines, mobile phones, computers, and so on. As Jiang Hai's car stopped in an open space in front of the tribe, Jiang Hai also got out of the car. Of course, he still had a lot of food in his hand, but he didn't finish it. He distributed it to the children who came out of the tribe. After these children took the food from Jiang Hai, they were not in a hurry to eat. Instead, they looked at Jiang Hai and the car over there curiously. The young people had gone out to trade, so they knew what a car was, but these children didn't, so they were still very curious. "Hello, guests from afar." Just as Jiang Hai distributed the children's food and walked into the tribe, an old man came out surrounded by some people. He spoke to Jiang Hai in a slightly stiff English. "This is our tribal chief." At this time, the girl who had been following Jiang Hai introduced to Jiang Hai. "Hello." Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai immediately became serious and nodded to him solemnly. "Guest, can you explain your purpose of coming here?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man looked at him and asked with a chuckle. I'm from Wuxia. In our Wuxia, there is a saying that cultivation is to be close to nature, so I came here to cultivate my body and mind. I have been in this forest for 15 days, and I'm just about to return today." Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai said seriously. In fact, he was just bullshitting, but there has to be a reason. It's better to come up with a reason than to be embarrassed here. "Wuxia, the mysterious East. I heard that you know the people of the Kanaza tribe." After hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, it was up to him whether to believe it or not. Jiang Hai guessed that he wouldn't believe it, but he still had to say what needed to be said. Then, the old man changed the topic and asked Jiang Hai. "Yes, I'm from Winthrop. Our town has a cooperation with the Iroquois. They opened a small shop in my town. If it's the person in charge over there, he should know me." Jiang Hai thought for a moment and explained to the old man. At the same time, he also said seriously that it must be the person in charge. Jiang Hai couldn't guarantee that the ordinary people would know him. "Okay, I've already sent someone to inform the people of the Kanaza tribe. But before that, I'll have to trouble you to rest in the tribe. It just so happens that we're offering sacrifices. You can take a look. You outsiders should be quite interested in these things." Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to be lying, the old man didn't dare to believe him completely. Instead, he smiled and said to Jiang Hai, "Of course." Jiang Hai also knew that he wasn't prepared to have a conflict with these people, so he let him rest here. After talking to the chief, Jiang Hai walked into the Indian tribe. Then, Jiang Hai followed the people who brought him in and walked to the side of the square in the distance. After finding an empty space to sit down, Jiang Hai asked the little girl who could speak English next to him. "What's going on today? Before you met me, were you trying to catch someone?" Looking at the girl in front of him, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Now that he was here, he still felt that it was a little foggy. He didn't know what was going on at all. "It's like this. Today is our sacrifice event. A few days ago, a group of people came over and said that they were enthusiasts. They wanted to film the process of our sacrifice. Our chief agreed at that time, but during the sacrifice in the morning, when the offerings were being offered, these people suddenly attacked and injured the warriors of our tribe. They even snatched the offerings. Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai thought of a movie he had watched before. It was called Operation Eagle. At the beginning, he stole a tribe's gemstones. In the end, nothing happened to the gemstones, but he got into trouble when he drank the holy water. Could the offerings of this tribe be very valuable? Are the offerings of your tribe very valuable? With some doubts in his heart, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask her. Valuable? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl couldn't help but be a little confused. They lived here and didn't have any concept of money. Oh, so it can be exchanged for a lot of things? Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai explained to her. It can't be exchanged for anything. You'll know when you see it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl shook her head and said. Then, she pointed into the distance. Because the ceremony was disrupted just now, it had to be restarted now. The chief who spoke to Jiang Hai just now appeared on the high platform in front of them. After saying a lot of words that Jiang Hai couldn't understand, a few strong tribesmen brought out a few offerings. Jiang Hai took a look. These offerings were really, a cow, a sheep, and a dog. The cow was a very ordinary Angus breed, but because it wasn't taken care of very carefully, although it was strong, the hair on its body was a little black and not very bright. After all, Jiang Hai had raised a cow for 2 years. This cow wasn't worth much. The sheep was the same. It was just an ordinary boar goat. What was there to snatch? The last dog, he didn't know what kind of dog it was. Anyway, it didn't look very good, but it wasn't small. It should be a meat dog. What did they snatch? Looking at these 3 things, they didn't look valuable. Jiang Hai was a little confused. They snatched the dog. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl said seriously. Dog? What the hell? But hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai was also confused. Snatched the dog? What kind of method is this? Could it be that there are dog fans in the United States? With a self-deprecating smile, Jiang Hai looked at the dog again. He was very sure that it wasn't an expensive breed. What's there to snatch? It seems that dog fans all over the world are very strange. At this time, the patriarch finished praying. As his words fell, all the people in the tribe stood up and began to shout. Jiang Hai looked at them and stood up as well, but he didn't say anything. At this time, the few strong men who brought the offerings over there also moved. They directly put down the 3 animals and then began to bleed. As soon as the knife went in, the blood spurted out. It looked very shocking, but for Jiang Hai, who was used to seeing cattle and sheep slaughtered, such a bloody scene was nothing. It couldn't be that those people couldn't bear such a scene and went to save the dogs. Thinking of this, he shook his head. In this world, the law of the jungle is mainly followed. The weak are prey to the strong, it's that simple. People's kindness is also placed on these animals. At least, Jiang Hai himself raised dogs, but he didn't reject eating dog meat or anything like that. Chapter 755. When they were killing the dogs, the people on the other side deliberately glanced at Jiang Hai. They were afraid that the people outside were crazy. If Jiang Hai wanted to run up to save the dogs, they would be able to stop him immediately. Fortunately, Jiang Hai did not have such thoughts. After the 3 animals were killed, the old chief kept nagging and everyone sat down again. Then, they started chanting something that Jiang Hai did not understand. After they were done, the young lady deliberately told Jiang Hai that they were praying. They were praying that they would be able to hunt good prey or that their family members would be healthy and live a long life. In fact, the American government had given these Native Americans their own territory. They didn't just leave them here and let them fend for themselves. The medical treatment and other things were done quite well. In the United States, seeing a doctor was a huge expense. However, if one paid for medical insurance in a public hospital, it would be free of charge. Of course, there was a queue in public hospitals. It was just a matter of whether one could afford it or not. There was no queue in private hospitals, but the price, in the United States, doctors were a group of people with a high income. Of course, it was the same in China. Jiang Hai knew that if he said that, people would definitely say that he was talking nonsense. However, it happened right beside him. This was indeed something that had happened. It was just that the doctors in the country knew how to behave better than the doctors overseas. They would not easily reveal their wealth. Wouldn't they be waiting for others to report them? Therefore, it seemed that the doctors in the country did not earn that much. Anyway, the lives of these Native Americans, other than being far away from civilization, were pretty good. From medical treatment, safety, to eating, drinking, and going to the toilet, the American government was very good at it. Jiang Hai and the rest could not help but be envious. After the prayers, it was time for the biggest show of the day. They would perform their martial arts to the heavens. In fact, it was similar to a martial arts competition. The Native Americans did not refer to a single race. The name represented all the indigenous people living in the American continent except for the Inuit in Alaska. It did not refer to a single ethnic group or race. According to the little girl's words, they should be a branch of the legendary Sioux clan. However, the Sioux clan no longer existed. Everyone knew this very well. Their branch could only be considered a very, very distant branch. Such a small tribe couldn't pass down their own fighting techniques like the Mongols in Wuxia. Therefore, rather than a wrestling match, it was more like a competition. Punches and kicks were allowed, but they were not allowed to hit the opponent's face. They were not allowed to deliberately injure the opponent. As long as the opponent fell to the ground, it was considered a loss. As the little girl introduced the rules of the competition to Jiang Hai also listened. At this point, the three beasts had already been killed. The sacrificial ceremony was brought to the front of the altar. After the order was given, the strong women and the old men went to prepare the cattle and sheep. They were going to hold a party here. Jiang Hai was not a prisoner now, but a guest. The old chief said that Jiang Hai was a guest from afar. Therefore, he could also participate in the ceremony and eat the food. The young people quickly formed a circle, followed by another old man. He should be a cabinet elder of the tribe. Foreigners didn't seem to be called cabinet elders. Anyway, that was what it meant. As the voice of the man fell, two Native Americans came to the middle of the crowd. After saluting each other, they made a gesture and started fighting. Jiang Hai was also outside, watching the fight inside. He had to admit that these people's fighting techniques were really rough. They rarely dodged. Basically, you take a kick from me, I take a punch from you. Compared to Bell and the others, their techniques were very ordinary. No, it should be said that they had no techniques at all. But when he thought of these people's rules, Jiang Hai felt that if they didn't fight like this, there was no other way, because in this competition, if you fell to the ground, you would lose. You could place your hands on the ground, but if your knees or other parts of your body fell to the ground, then you would lose. Dodging would cause your center of gravity to shift. If you fell, then you would lose unjustly. Therefore, this kind of competition was more about who was stronger and whose body was sturdier. Of course, there were also some small tricks. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai was worried about their pain. He couldn't help but ask doubtfully, "They are fighting like this, doesn't it hurt?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl chuckled and said, "It hurts, but we have to endure it. Whoever wins in the end will become the tribe's #1 warrior. And even if he isn't the #1 warrior, he will go up and show his bravery and win the hearts of the girls in the tribe. If he is lucky and wins the title of the #1 warrior, there will be a special reward at night." Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai grinned. He roughly understood what these people meant. These Native Americans mainly lived in their own civilization. Although they now ate cooked meat and knew how to use seasoning, the difference between them and civilized society wasn't as big as imagined. In this aspect, they still maintained their own customs. This made Jiang Hai feel quite interested. At this time, the battle on the field was also decided. A big man named Bazakan won the battle. Under his last attack, his opponent's knees fell to the ground and he lost the battle. After this person lost, he swaggered back to the tribe. This was the treatment they got after winning once. There was no such thing as taking turns to fight. If you beat one person, you would enter the second round. Then, until there was no one left, the winner would enter the second round. Then, the winner would enter the second round, the third round, the fourth round, and so on until there was only one person left. That person would be the strongest. As he walked in, the next pair of people didn't need to be urged this time. They directly stood up and started fighting. It was simple and crude, but Jiang Hai watched with great interest. He had to admit that it was quite interesting to watch a fight. At least, men liked this feeling. Not everyone liked to watch dodging. Unknowingly, after the sixth pair of people finished fighting, the sky was gradually getting dark. When Jiang Hai woke up, it was already noon. After eating, coming here, and watching the ceremony, it was almost 3 o'clock. Plus, after so many fights, the sky was already a bit westward. In the middle, the old chief came to talk to Jiang Hai. After all, the Iroquois tribe was a bit far from here. Most importantly, they also had a ceremony today, so the people in charge couldn't leave. At least they knew that Jiang Hai wouldn't be in danger here, so it didn't matter if they left or not. The chief told the people of the tribe to take good care of Jiang Hai and let Jiang Hai rest here for a night. They would definitely come tomorrow morning. Jiang Hai didn't care about this. After all, he had been out for so long, one night wouldn't make a difference. Most importantly, he couldn't leave now even if he wanted to. Without the Iroquois tribe to explain the situation to him, it wouldn't be easy for him to leave. Most importantly, it was quite interesting to watch them fight. As the sky gradually darkened, the women and elders in the distance lit the fire after preparing dinner. Under the starry sky, beside the fire, the fight was still going on. The women had cut the meat, made the soup, and filled the wine, and brought it over one by one. Jiang Hai was a distinguished guest here, so he was specially given a steak, a whole leg of lamb, a big bowl of soup, and a whole pot of wine. This wine was brewed by them, pure grain wine. Although it was made from corn, the alcohol content was quite high. Jiang Hai originally didn't drink white wine. Later on, because he had an interest in soaked wine, he went to get some soaked wine. Even now, he was still at home. Usually, he would drink some. So he was quite satisfied with this wine. He grabbed the leg of lamb, tore a piece of meat in his mouth, and swallowed it. Then he drank a mouthful of soup and a mouthful of wine. This feeling was really good, just like the bandits in the books, eating meat in big mouthfuls and drinking big bowls of wine. And Jiang Hai's forthright way of eating also made the nearby Native Americans very happy. They liked to make friends who ate like this. Even the old chief gave Jiang Hai a thumbs up from afar, expressing his admiration for Jiang Hai's way of eating. Unknowingly, the meat was almost finished, the wine was also drunk, and the competition in front of Jiang Hai was almost over. The second round, the third round, the fourth round. When it came to the seventh round, there were only 2 people left on the field. Jiang Hai had seen one of the 2 people before. It was the man full of scars who had led him here today. The other man was about the same size and weight as him. The 2 people were currently fighting on the field, and it seemed like neither of them could win against the other. As for the little girl beside Jiang Hai, she looked at the field with a nervous expression. These two people are about the same level, it won't be easy to determine the winner. Looking at the little girl's nervous expression, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Yes, Vero is very strong, he was last year's strongest, but my brother will definitely win. After the girl heard Jiang Hai's words, she looked at the field seriously. Then, as if she was cheering for herself and her brother, she said in a low voice. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. So this little girl and the big man were actually siblings, Jiang Hai couldn't tell. But at this time, the situation on the field also changed. The two people who were originally fighting were unknowingly getting closer and closer to the fire. This was something that no one could control, because the two people's strength was about the same. Just when the elder felt that they were too close to the fire and was about to stop them, the burning firewood in the fire suddenly popped, and a lot of sparks flew out. Coincidentally, when these sparks flew out, the man named Vero had his back facing the fire, while the little girl's brother was facing the fire. The Native Americans didn't care if their backs were burned, but the girl's brother was hit in the face by the sparks. He immediately retracted his power, and Vero took advantage of this opportunity to grab the girl's brother and trip him with his leg. The girl's brother fell back like a mountain toppling a jade pillar. In the end, there was no miracle. The little girl's brother landed on the ground first, and Vero instantly jumped up and roared loudly. Although there was an accident in the end, these Native Americans didn't care about this. Seeing Vero win, everyone cheered. Only the little girl was a little helpless, and at the same time, there was even a trace of fear in her eyes. Patan, you've lost. Your sister is mine tonight. Looking at the little girl's brother on the ground who still couldn't believe the result, Vero laughed loudly and said to him. In this tribe, on the day the first warrior was born, he could appoint a girl to be his wife. This was the biggest benefit that the little girl mentioned just now. In fact, Vero had taken a fancy to the little girl a long time ago, but the little girl said that she wanted to wait until the United States recognized her as an adult. This year, she was 18 months old, and her birthday was last month. This time, if he appointed her as his wife, the little girl would be in trouble. Let's go. However, it was obvious that this person came with this purpose. The Native Americans followed the law of the jungle. Although Vero wanted to marry his little sister, which made Patan very unwilling, he really couldn't do anything about it. This was the price of losing. At this time, Vero walked into the crowd and saw the little girl sitting next to Jiang Hai. He smiled foolishly. In fact, he wasn't a bad person, he liked this little girl wholeheartedly. To become the first warrior, marrying her openly was also his vow. From another perspective, this was a story of childhood sweethearts, but from the little girl's perspective, it wasn't a good story. I'm not going to go with you. The little girl said to Vero and flashed behind Jiang Hai, using Jiang Hai's body as a shield. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't want to get involved in this tribe, but now, it seemed that he had no choice but to be involved. Outsider, step aside. Vero's English was very poor, and he only knew a few words, but when he saw Patan's little sister's actions, he knew that she wanted this fair-skinned outsider to protect her. It would be strange if Vero was nice to Jiang Hai. Ahem, although I don't really understand the rules of your tribe, is there any way to prevent this little girl from going with you? Jiang Hai looked at the little girl behind him. After all, he knew her, so it wasn't appropriate for him to say that he didn't want to help, so he just stretched out his hand and asked with a smile. If you want to help this little girl, you'll have to compete, but you haven't experienced the competition, so it's not fair for Vero. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the big guy in front of him didn't understand, but the patriarch heard it. He gently tapped his wooden staff and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai stood up with a smile. That's easy, I'll fight 7 rounds. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.